and the genuine concerns that have been raised on various sides are addressed. So perhaps a meeting over the lunch hour would help to achieve that result. And possibly it would be helpful also if one or other of the evidence leaders were present as well. Thank you. Colonel, you're still under oath. Mr. Chairperson?
Mr. Chairperson, we asked Colonel Scott yesterday to produce a supplemented version of Exhibit J63, which would identify the source of the various photographs and videos, and we're grateful to the Colonel for having done so. The document has just been handed up to the Commissioners. I wonder if we can mark it Exhibit J63 capital A.
J63,
capital A.
J63 capital A. Do you have any objection to that, Mr. Semenya? No. The exhibit is so marked.
And
thank you, Colonel. I'm sorry. I always feel sorry for witnesses when they're given homework assignments to do overnight. But you accepted the assignments very, very gracefully, and we're very grateful to you for what you've done. There was a counter assignment voluntarily undertaken by the evidence leaders. I hope they've responded as promptly as you have.
We're still working on the hard drive, Mr. Chairperson. It does contain several thousand documents. But, Colonel, before we move off from your homework, I've just skimmed this document, and I'm grateful to you for having produced it. It seems to me that there may have been 3 omissions on it which we can quickly cure now. If you go to slide 98 on the second page of the document, the source there would, because it's a warrant officer Nong video, would be SABC, would it not?
Sorry, you went too fast for me. Which one number is this?
Slide 98.
What must be right in that?
I would just ask the Colonel to confirm that on slide 98 against 052.mts, the source would have been SABC.
That's correct.
And then on slide 192, Mr. Green.jpg, I'll need guidance from the Colonel. My instinct would be that the source would be media, but the Colonel may be able to confirm that.
Yes, I was also under that impression that it was media.
Sorry, 192?
192.
I see.
And 201 is
SABC.
Is SABC. It's photographs taken by SABC. And that seems to account for everything.
Mr. Taskerson, Advocate Hemorrhage asked me a question which I don't know the answer, but I'm sure you do. Which file must this Exhibit J63 capital A be inserted in once it's been duly punched? I suppose you have to go after 63. J63 is in which file?
Well, the man who can give me an answer to that, I'm afraid, has just left the room, but can we come back to you on that?
Well, once he comes back to the room, you can come back to me.
Colonel, if we can then pick up from where we were in yesterday's testimony, and just to recap, you were shown footage of the missing Nell video 229, and you'd agreed that it showed footage of Sergeant Fenter throwing a stun grenade from the helicopter that was commanded by Brigadier Fritz in a position which was approximately 1 kilometer to the west of Kopi 3.
Yes.
And I'd read to you Sergeant Fenter's explanation in her pocketbook for her use of stun grenades. And just to remind you, the entry's at 1555 in her pocketbook, which is Exhibit J55, and I'll read it again. Tijdens ligsteen sien Sergeant Fenter hoe stakers op die SAPD-lede afstorm met pangas en opkieries. Het ook gesien dat sommige lede van die stakers handwapens het. Verleen hulp aan SAPD, gooi 3 stun grenades om stakers met pangas en nopkieries uit mekaar te jaag, om te verhoed dat SAPD-lede verder aangeval word, as ook om te help dat SAP-lede persone met wapens kan arresteer. And you had conceded that you were unaware of any incidents 1 kilometer to the west of Corpi 3 where members of SAPS had been charged at by a group of strikers armed with pangas, nopkieries or handguns.
Yes, I wasn't aware of anything that happened that far out.
Now, that of course was hearsay, but as I understood your evidence, you had made it your business to endeavour to obtain information, as much information as you could,
yes,
about what happened there. So if that had happened, one would have expected that incident to have been reported, yes, to you. Is that correct?
Jason, in the defence of Warrant Officer Fenter as well, it's a pocketbook entry which is made after the fact. And I think it would be more accurate should she deliver a statement on the issue, because a pocketbook is something, once again, done in hindsight, where she would simply be trying to capture the events of the day as a police officer would, and not necessarily in the accuracy that I think a statement from her side would provide. Because I think, with all respect, she is referring to incidents that happened possibly at scene 1 or scene 2, and not necessarily where that distance from the... Because I'm not aware of anything that happened that far from scene 2.
To be fair, if something of that kind had happened, one would have expected that to have been reported to you when you sought to obtain as much information as you could about what happened at
exactly.
the scene. Is that right? I think that's a very fair answer. Thank you.
We will ask for a statement from Sergeant Fenter in due course. For present purposes, I would merely point out to the Commission that it would be highly unlikely that she was referring to anything that happened at scene 1, because she only got into the...
Yeah, well, that's an argument too. I suppose theoretically it's possible, but let's hear what she has to say. If necessary, she can be cross-examined.
Now, the second missing video from Colonel Nell's series was video 230. We don't need to play it unless you'd like to play it, but if I can just show you a screenshot from point 24 seconds into that video, it will be J71, and the screenshot is at 24 seconds of the video. We printed out a copy for the commissioners. It's at page 183 of file 1. 183 of file 1.
Has the witness got a copy, or must I lend him my file 1?
It's just on the screen behind you, Chair.
I'm happy with that, Chair.
If I understand you haven't been favoured with a set of files, because we were given the references, of course. If you ever feel the need to look at the file, just let me know and I'll lend you mine.
Okay.
183. And Colonel, would you agree that what we see in the screenshot appears to be a stun grenade in the right hand of Colonel Fenter, of Sergeant Fenter?
A warrant officer, Sergeant Fenter, yes, I agree.
Thank you. I'd now like to refer you to the evidence of Colonel Botha in relation to the stun grenades. And for that, we need to turn to page 427 of the transcript. And I wonder if page 427 of the transcript can be put up on the screen so that you can see it in front of you. I must apologize for this. Apparently it cannot be put up. Can I read the evidence of Colonel Botha at page 427, and if you would like a hard copy, we'll get a hard copy made available for you. At 4:27, Colonel Botha was being questioned by Mr. Mpofu. And from line 10, the testimony proceeds as follows. Mr. Mpofu says, your evidence earlier was that part of the activities of the people in your helicopter was to throw a stun grenade, 2 stun grenades if I am correct. Is that right? Lieutenant Colonel Botha, that is correct, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mpofu, at whom or at what? What was the target? Lieutenant Colonel Botha, sir, it was an operation proceeding taken by Brigadier Fritz. He just gave the instruction. And that's the passage I would emphasize. Sir, it was an operation proceeding taken by Brigadier Fritz. He just gave the instruction. Then, later in the evidence of Colonel Botha, he was questioned by Mr. Burger for Lonman. 579 at the foot of the page, line 24, over the page 580. And Mr. Burger asked him, who gave the order for 25 is the line number. Who gave the order for stun grenades to be fired? And the answer at the top of page 580, Lieutenant Colonel Botha, Brigadier Fritz. And then later on at page 586, Mr. Burger continued, on the third possible function, namely that of crowd control, we do not have enough facts yet to make a submission. So may I ask you, why was it necessary to fire stun grenades at the crowd when it was done? And the answer of Lieutenant Colonel Botha was, sir, that's an operational call that was made by Brigadier Fritz. I don't know, you'll have to ask him. So the repeated evidence of Colonel Botha was that the instruction to throw stun grenades came from your commanding officer in the SDF, Brigadier Fritz.
I hear so, yes.
And you're happy to accept that on the reading of the transcript that I've given to you. You don't need to view the transcript yourself. Now, when Colonel Botha testified on the 30th of October, my learned friend for SAPS, Mr. Semenya SC, did seek to correct some issues of Colonel Botha's testimony at pages 572 to 574 of the record. But he didn't place in issue Colonel Botha's evidence that the instruction to throw the stun grenades came from Brigadier Fritz. So you're happy to accept that?
Yes.
Thereafter, Brigadier Fritz furnished his first statement. That's Exhibit G8, which on its face was signed on 5 November. And I wonder if we can call that up. And if we can go down to paragraph 7, which is the relevant paragraph of the statement. During the flight, the ALEO then threw a stun grenade close to the running crowd about 30 meters away from them. She then moments later threw another stun grenade some 30 meters from another crowd. The chopper was between 20 and 30 meters from the ground. She had not been instructed to do so. She had sought permission to do so from me, and I allowed her. The stun grenade incidents were more than a kilometer away from the Kopi to the west thereof in the direction of the Korea mine. Now, for reasons which weren't altogether clear to the evidence leaders, in this statement of 5 November 2012, Brigadier Fritz did not provide any explanation for the throwing of the stun grenades. He only asserted that he hadn't given an order for them to be thrown. He had permitted them to be thrown. So, in advance of, well, in expectation of the testimony of Brigadier Fritz before this commission, the evidence leaders sent Brigadier Fritz a list of questions which we wanted him to address in his supplementary statement. And one of those concerned the purpose Brigadier Fritz sought to achieve in authorizing the throwing of the stun grenades. And then, about a week ago, we received Brigadier Fritz's supplementary statement, which is dated 4 August 2013. I suspect it should be 4 September 2013, but nothing turns on that. And we'd like to introduce that statement as Exhibit J72. And it is at page 864 of file 3.2, of file 3.2. And if we can call up Triple J 72. And if we can go to paragraph 7, it's again paragraph 7 in which the issue of the stun grenades is addressed. And there Brigadier Fritz says the following under the heading stun grenades. I did not know at the time what the name of the person was who threw the stun grenades from the chopper. I now know that it was the Air Law Enforcement Officer, Sergeant Fenter. I did not instruct that stun grenades be thrown from the chopper. I permitted it when the ALEO told me that her unit had used this method of dispersal of crowds very successfully in the past. Since I am not a crowd management or public order person, I was in no position to disagree with her. None of the other 3 people in the chopper disagreed with her on this issue. The ALEO said that the purpose of throwing the stun grenade was to disperse the crowds. The size of the groups where the stun grenades were thrown was about 30 people. When 2 stun grenades were thrown, the chopper flew at a height of about 20 to 30 meters above the ground. As regards the precise position where the stun grenade was thrown, I shall provide a map and indicate the approximate vicinity at which it was thrown. I shall not be able to give the precise place, but it was at an open space next to a footpath approximately 1 kilometer from the koppies. The purpose for permitting the throwing of the stun grenades was to disperse the crowds of who were having blankets around them in order for the police to identify who among the crowds had firearms. So, if I can give you what I understand Brigadier Fritz to be saying, he says, first of all, that he effectively deferred to Sergeant Fenter on the wisdom of throwing the stun grenades. You would accept that?
Yes.
But the reason he gives for allowing the stun grenades to be thrown is not wholly consistent with the reason that Sergeant Fenter recorded in her pocketbook as her reason for throwing them. Sergeant Fenter spoke about wanting to support SAPS members in the field by dispersing armed strikers who'd been charging at the SAPS with pangas and nopgiris, and thus preventing further attacks on SAPS and helping SAPS to arrest the armed strikers. Brigadier Fritz, on the other hand, says nothing about strikers attacking the police. He says the purpose was to disperse crowds who had blankets around them so that the police could identify who among the crowd had firearms. Would you accept that?
Again, I think it's necessary to raise that it's a pocketbook entry. It's not a statement from Sergeant Fenter. And that I don't think she would be giving, in that confined space of her pocketbook, the full story. I think she's reflecting more onto the event of Marikana when she's speaking about what she is alluding to.
I see. Well, look, we will in due course have to take this up with Brigadier Fritz and Sergeant Fenter, but for present purposes, I'd want to ask you that in terms of the deployments that you had arranged in terms of your plan for the day, while Scene 2 was taking place, what SAPS members would have been in a position where they would have been able to identify firearms under blankets on strikers fleeing the scene approximately a kilometer to the west of Kopi 3? What SAPS members would have been in a position to...
Well, in hindsight, knowing how the SAPS members moved, not that Scene 2 was part of the planning process, that stopped at the reorganized line for decisions to be made thereafter on what to do. But from my hindsight on knowing who moved where, the people fleeing towards the west, on the police members on ground in that direction were the forward holding area 2 members, being under Captain Kidd's command, and that was a grouping of public order policemen, TRT members, and I think there was the odd dog handler who did not have their dogs with him at that time.
Yeah, that's what we thought too. But then we looked at the times of videos 229 and 230. And what occurred to us was that at that stage, Captain Kidd's team and the reserves from Forward Holding Area 2 under his command had long since left Forward Holding Area 2 and were at this stage already at the Kopi. If I can explain that timing to you. If we go to Captain Nell's video 229, at 2 minutes 15 seconds to 2 minutes 25 seconds into that video, we see Sergeant Fenter edging out of the helicopter to throw a stun grenade. I can show that to you if you would like me to, or are you willing to accept it on my say-so?
Are these the 2 stun grenades that we watched yesterday?
Well, there are 2. Maybe we should go to 2 minutes 15 seconds of the video 229, which was CC.
If it's the video we watched yesterday,
it is. I'm not sure. I think I stopped the show, the display of the video before we reached that point, because I only took it. I was wanting to save time. I took it to the first stun grenade. There's a second stun grenade that gets thrown later, and I don't want you to think that what you saw yesterday is what I'm describing now. So let's roll it to 2:15 of video 229.
Which is
sorry, can you just confirm the point in the video at which we are stopped at this point? We should be watching CC32. We've stopped at 2 minutes 15. And Sergeant Fenter is out of has opened the door of the helicopter again. If we can just roll. And would you accept that what we appear to have seen there was Sergeant Fenter throwing a stun grenade?
Yes.
now.
If we go back to our reconciliation of times, we see that the point at 2:15 of Sergeant Fenter's, of Captain Nell's video 229, translates to an ETV time of 16:08:40. Now, that is more than a minute after what has become something of a signature shot in this commission, which is the blue dye white water shot at scene 2 that was taken by Colonel Vermark in his Pentax in file JJ10457. So can we call up JJ10547? And if we can call up 4547. Do we have the photograph file 4547 accessible to call up? We seem only to have the screenshot. I wonder if I can ask Mr. Wesley just to make a copy, quickly to make a copy of that onto a memory stick, because he'll have it on his hard drive under the 16th of August directory. And to copy it over, it will take only a minute, but it is quite an important file to show.
Mr. Chaskelson, while that's happening, I don't know if the witness has read Brigadier Fritz's statement before, but I just wanted to inquire, paragraph 6.4 and 6.5, is that perhaps not germane to the discussion, and might not the witness be referred to that as well?
Colonel, do you have the supplementary statement of Brigadier Fritz to hand?
No, not ESOP. But it's. I'd be happy if you read it.
I think you should have it in front of you because the Commissioner is concerned about a particular passage, and I will want to, depending on your response, I may want to take it further with you.
It's 6.4 and 6.5.
While you're looking, may I ask, was the witness given notice of the fact that he would be questioned on this supplementary statement of Brigadier Fritz?
Yes, Chairperson. It was quite short notice because the supplementary statement only came in a few days ago, but he was given notice. Colonel, Commissioner Hemraj was referring to paragraph 6.4, where Brigadier Fritz states, "We then flew back to Wonderkop and turned left, just north of the scene, and flew back towards the Korea mine. From there we flew to the power station around the scene, back to the northwestern side of the scene, focusing on the people running to the Korea mines area. We then hovered close to some of the members at holding area 2, indicating to them not to run to the Kopi area, but more to the north to prevent the armed strikers to go to the Korea mine. For a while we focused on the area northwest of the scene. That is where ALEO Sergeant Fenter threw the stun grenades. To the area northwest of the scene."
That is when.
That is when. I beg your pardon, Chairperson. That is when Sergeant Fenter threw the stun grenade. Is there anything that you would want to say in response to my earlier question to you on the basis of 6.4?
If you can refresh my memory on the question on 6.4.
It is a while. Well, let's look at the 4547.
Before you carry on, can I ask a question? In paragraph 7.4, he says he'll provide a map indicating the approximate vicinity at which the stun grenade was thrown. Has he provided that map? Because if he provided the map, then a lot of the points that are now being debated may well either fall away or be able to be dealt with more precision.
Yes. We haven't received that map, but we can locate the position of the helicopter in rough terms from the visuals that we see coming out of the helicopter's window, as we did with Colonel Scott yesterday, where Colonel Scott identified Corps B3 and estimated that we were a kilometre to the west of Corps B3.
Chairperson, I assisted him with that map. It's actually on my computer. He actually showed me where, and I just put 2 icons on Google Earth for him. And then,
well, if you can give us that information now, then that might shorten proceedings a bit.
Yeah, it is.
You say you've got it on your computer. You've got your computer with you.
Yes.
Can you print it out? Well, perhaps I'll tell you what we'll do. Would it be convenient for us to revert to the map part after tea and give the Colonel an opportunity during tea to print that thing, or is there something that can be done while you're still giving evidence? But if you can find it on your computer?
I think it was sent to Brigadier Pretorius's computer for printing purposes. So if she can be contacted.
Oh, I see. Well, let's ask the police SABC representatives. Mr. Semenya or can you or your attorney help us with this map at the moment? So it may shorten the proceedings a bit if we have the precise position.
Yes, we will.
Alternatively, it can be obtained, I take it, reasonably quickly.
We certainly will, Chair.
Yes, all right. Thank you.
To come back to this photograph, if we zoom in on the dry dam to the southwest of Copy 2.
I think you should give us the reference to what we're now seeing, so that when we read the record later and when historians and others in the future read it, they'll know what exactly is happening.
Chairperson, it's JJJ10.4547. And I'd ask Mr. Wesley to assist our video operator to zoom into the dry dam, but actually to zoom the picture in so that we can see what the picture shows when we zoom it in, and move a little bit to the right, and stop there, and zoom in a bit further if possible. Now, Colonel, would you agree that the men that we see there entering the dam and moving up to alongside the western side of the dam are Captain Kidd's TRT line, or Captain Kidd's Reserve Forces from Forward Holding Area 2?
That's correct.
Now, the time of this photograph in ETV time is 16:10:30. 16:10:30. I beg your pardon. 16:07:24. 16:07:24. 16:10:30 is another moment to which I will move now. 16:07:24.
I accept that.
And if we go back to the screenshot of Sergeant Fenter holding a stun grenade at 24 seconds of video 230, that would translate into an ETV time of 16:10:30. That's what 16:10:30 is.
Okay.
So if we can recap everything now. 229 and 230 show footage from the chopper of Brigadier Fritz of Sergeant Fenter holding and throwing stun grenades. Colonel Botha says Brigadier Fritz instructed her to throw stun grenades, but Brigadier Fritz says he didn't. Brigadier Fritz says he deferred to Sergeant Fenter's reasons for throwing stun grenades, but the reasons he gives don't match the reasons she records in her pocketbook. You're nodding your head through each one of these propositions I'm putting to you. Can I take it that you...
Colonel Botha gives a different account. He says he doesn't know what the reason was. It was operational order given by Brigadier Fritz. Brigadier Fritz says that he got the reason from Sergeant Fenter. All the people in the helicopter heard it. No one disagreed with her, and therefore he gave her authority, which means that Lieutenant Colonel Botha would have heard what Sergeant Fenter had said, if that was true, and known what the reason was, and wouldn't have said it was an operational order given by Brigadier Fritz. So there's a third version which is different from the other two.
Thank you, Chair. Colonel Scott, would you accept that what the Chair has just put to me as a further inconsistency?
Yes, and maybe just to add that my logic would tell me that whoever brought the stun grenades with had an intention. You don't take a stun grenade in a helicopter. If it was Brigadier Fritz that had brought the stun grenades, he would have given them to somebody to throw, maybe sitting in the middle seat. If it was somebody else that brought the stun grenades, they had a pre-intention of doing what they were going to do. That could prove Brigadier Fritz's version as being correct.
Now, if we get to Brigadier Fritz's version, he says that the purpose was to disperse crowds who had blankets around them so that the police could identify who among the crowds had the firearms. But when these stun grenades were being thrown, the police unit that might otherwise have been able to intercept these people had already moved up to copy 2 and was no longer at forward holding area 2, to scene 2, copy 3. So were there any policemen to the west who would have been able to intercept that crowd at that point?
Again, I'm speaking from reasoning now with you on what you're showing, but just a couple of factors. Approximately 2 minutes after the photo we're seeing, the stun grenades are thrown. I know that there is other photographs which show a lot of strikers just to the north of Copy 2, which evidently Brigadier Carlitz and his teams went to intercept, as well as TRT members, which are shown in that photograph with their berets on, which assisted with that arresting and intercepting to the north. Now, for protesters to be at least 1 kilometer from scene 2, if they ran it, they could have run it between 4 to 6 minutes. If they walked it, they would have walked it anything from 8 to 12 minutes. So the fact that the TRT members are at scene 2, sweeping through, preventing anybody coming through with firearms or weapons for that matter, means that they would need to have been there 10 minutes earlier to have prevented the initial groups that had walked away, which Brigadier Fritz then could be referring to, which are at least 1 kilometer now already from scene 2.
Yes, but at the point at which the stun grenades were thrown, which is
2 minutes after this photo.
2 minutes after this photo, approximately, where was Colonel Kidd's team?
2 minutes after.
Captain Kidd's.
Captain Kidd's team was, I'm presuming that they would have been at that stage lying down. If I can remember the sequence of photographs, I think they'd had their first encounter by that time with the strikers.
It was roughly at the time of their first encounter of the strikers, and they would have been taking cover around the rocks that we see here. Would that be correct? So they wouldn't have been in a position to intercept people running away 1 kilometer to the west, would they?
No, they wouldn't have been, but it's not to say that was the only group moving to the west. I'm not playing the advocate for Brigadier Fritz and the chopper, but if you consider, I don't think there was only one group moving. There were probably more than one, because Brigadier Carlitz's group even intercepted people at this time, which means there was a flow of people moving to the west.
Yes, but the question that the issue that I'm putting to you is that there wasn't a police unit in a position to intercept people who were already 1 kilometer to the west.
No.
Thank you.
You mean yes? You agree with them?
Yes, I agree with him. No, there wasn't a unit that far out. Yes.
If we can now move to Exhibit L, page 140, slide 146. Now, this is a slide in which you set out the functions that were to be performed by Brigadier Fritz in terms of your plan. Is that correct?
The slides that you're showing now, which depict the tables, were...
Yes, no, but if you start at slide 135, you explain that these tables were compiled afterwards.
Yes.
But you explain why that was. But you then set out what the briefing was and what these various groups were supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And you set out in tabular form for us to make it easier for us to follow. And 146 is the one which you compiled late, admittedly, but effectively reflecting, I take it, what the briefing was that the people in that helicopter were given before they set out. Is that correct?
It's correct, Chairperson. I just wanted to point out that this is reflecting stage 2. The difference for stage 3 was not much different, but there are going to be issues mentioned there under comments, for instance, which the deploying of the forces from immediate reaction area, for instance, is not part of phase 3 or a stage 3. Those forces were already deployed. So just in case discrepancies like that would come up, but what he was to do remains pretty much the same. But this briefing that you're seeing here was the 6 o'clock the morning, the deployment for a stage 2 briefing, or a phase 2.
But Colonel, you do confirm that this would have been essentially the function to be performed by Brigadier Fritz after you have moved to phase 3, stage 3?
Yes, what was expected of him with his chopper was to look at the tactical forces and their part of the operation, as well as anything wayward, because there was an Oryx helicopter with a team of tactical forces that could be deployed to wayward incidents should they be required. So he had a dual purpose, amongst others also with his role of conveying information if he could, or raising whatever issues he thought necessary. But what he was expected to do was look at the tactical forces and what they were doing, and to, as I say, look at whatever was happening away from the main POPs dispersion area, if there were any incidents occurring or wayward that he would need to deal with the backup force coming by Oryx helicopter if necessary.
I'm interested in the aerial command function, because it seems to me that once you move from stage 2 to stage 3, aerial command of the tactical forces becomes even more important. Would you accept that?
It would, but it's not taking away the function of POPs with the ground commander, with an operational commander on ground with his forces. And I know that, well, I don't want to preempt any questions, so I'll...
But if we can just explore this a little further, once you move to phase 3, to stage 3, excuse my interchange of phase and stage. At this stage, I'm just referring to stage 3, so if I say phase, it's stage. I'll try not to. Once once the operation has moved to stage 3, you have specific functions assigned to the tactical forces to deal with high-risk arrests. Is that correct?
Yes.
And those functions may have to be executed in terrain that is difficult.
Yes.
And terrain that is not easy to observe in its totality from the ground.
Yes, I would believe so, yes.
So the aerial command of the tactical forces becomes particularly important.
Well, you can't defer the fact that the groups on the ground have their own team leaders and ground command with them as well.
But the command of the tactical forces in relation to effecting high-risk arrests is going to be a function that is going to be performed at least in tandem with the aerial command STF the aerial command post in the helicopter. Is that not correct?
Again, from the air, Brigadier Fritz would not be giving tactical command to ground forces. The idea was that he would be the eye in the sky in a sense, and as being the eye in the sky, and due to his rank designation, being the overall commander of those forces, if he needed to make a contingency call on their behalf, then he would be able to do so. If he needed to pull TRT away from Copy 2 because he saw that the STF and NIU were encountering major trouble, he would be able to do and make that executive decision based on those tactical forces.
And that, I presume, is what you're trying to capture in that first bullet point: direct the counteraction should the tactical forces from immediate reaction areas be deployed as part of the solution to an action by protesters, considering the POPs members have relinquished control and withdrawn due to the threat surpassing POPs' capability.
And that's what it's saying there, and that's applicable for a phase 2. And a phase 2, if this was necessary, meant that the police were under attack and that they would have need to have closed off their razor wire. And if the tactical forces were requested to intervene, it means that the POPs have withdrawn into their nyalas in this instance, or have withdrawn because their capability, their force continuum was not sufficient to deal with the threat that was posed to them.
Now, Colonel, you're confusing me with phase and stage. Are you referring to stage 2 or phase 2 of stage 3?
No, I'm talking to the phases now. As I say, only after 13:30 or after I briefed them at 14:30 did we get to stages. So I'm trying to stick to phases because it's all pre-14:30 time.
Then I must apologize to you. So you're describing phase 2 of the operation, the plan for phase 2 of the operation.
Yes, the Thursday morning deployment.
But a fortiori, once we have shifted over to phase 3, and once the tactical forces have been deployed in phase 3, that aerial command function that you have in the first bullet point would become an important function to be exercised by Brigadier Fritz. Is that not correct?
It would be, as I've said, yes.
Now, if we can cut back then to the photograph of JJ104547. And maybe if at this point we can zoom back so that we can see the full photograph and the full scene that it depicts. Would you agree that at this point, when the operation has moved to Copy 3, there are no POPs members outside of their nyalas?
No. Oh, I'd agree with you, no, there are none that I can see outside the nyalas, yes.
In terms of the previous slide that we saw, the bullet point on slide 146, which we don't need to call up again, at this stage, the tactical forces from the immediate reaction areas have been deployed.
Yes, they were called in already prior to the then stage 3 beginning.
Yes. And we have a situation here where what is going to unfold is that mine workers are going to entrench themselves into Copy 3, and there's going to be a need to get them out of there. Is that not correct?
Well, yes, I hear what you're saying.
Would you accept that it's a broadly accurate description of
yes,
what is going to unfold?
Yes.
And in that context, it would be important to have tactical forces to execute the high-risk arrests that may need to be executed.
Well, again, I don't want to... we're going to move in the direction that I give my opinions on what happened there. And again, I want to just state for the record, it's unfair of me to sit with the hindsight that I have and to make these calls on commanders that were on ground with the limited knowledge they had, the limited visibility they had. And we're looking at an aerial picture to give the ideal situation or how an ideal commander should have run it at that time. So it's difficult for me to do that, to judge my peers knowing what I know now compared to what they knew at that time.
You see, Colonel, that's getting to the point I want to make, which is to be able to have this aerial picture and to be able to exercise command with the aid of this aerial picture, one really needs one's aerial command post to be in a position close to or above the copy to be able to direct the tactical forces. Would you accept that's correct?
Yes, I accept that. And again, it's hearsay, but what I have heard spoken from Brigadier Fritz is that he instructed his helicopter to fly a lot outside of the area. I know that they did come in, and again, I'm just reflecting his words. because of the fear that of the power lines, and I think there was up to 4 helicopters in the air, all around scene 1 and scene 2, thus telling his helicopter to start moving more towards the outer areas.
Look, these are all issues, the details of which we will canvass with Brigadier Fritz, but for present purposes, where this all started was with 2 videos which weren't disclosed to the evidence leaders. You'll recall that.
Yes.
And will you accept that the exchanges that we've just had reflect that what we see in NEL videos 229 and 230, and in particular, the throwing of stun grenades in an area where it seems there were no policemen to hand to intercept fleeing strikers, which is a fact which is odd to square with, is difficult to square with the explanation put forward by Brigadier Fritz. And secondly, the fact that while those stun grenades were being thrown 1 kilometer west of Kopi 3, a scene was unfolding at Kopi 3 where the aerial command post would have been greatly appreciated. Those 2 factors call for something of an explanation from Brigadier Fritz.
Well, I don't know if I must comment on my point of view.
I'm not asking for your explanation, but would you accept that Brigadier Fritz has to provide an explanation for those 2 factors?
He would need to, yes.
And it's at least potentially awkward for him to have to deal with those 2 facts. He may have an explanation, he may not. We don't know at this stage. We'll have to wait and see. But it is at least potentially awkward.
Well, I have a logical explanation, but I don't want to put it out now. I mean, it's him that needs to explain the issues, yes.
Can I ask you this? Have you been through all of the NEL videos?
Yes, I would say yes. I can't remember them all pertinently, but I would have gone through them to see what they contained.
Well, other than the 2 that we've been discussing, 229 and 230, can you think of any video from Captain Nel that shows content that really calls for an explanation from the SAPS?
Well, if I must think like the attorneys on the evidence leaders or the opposing attorneys, then obviously the others don't show anything that you would consider to be controversial. Obviously, you're bringing up the point that those 2 videos with the throwing of stun grenades are controversial, and he would need to give explanation to that to satisfy you.
Well, that's broadly what our view is as well. We've been through all of these videos of Captain Nel, and apart from videos 229 and 230, we can't see any content in these videos that cries out for an explanation from SABS. So the only material in the NEL videos that from our perspective calls for an explanation from your commanding officer, and just happens to appear in 2 videos that weren't disclosed to us in the first instance. Will you accept that?
Yes.
Now let's go back to the sequence in which these the chronology. So if we can just go back to the sequence in which these videos came to you and to us. You say you received an initially incomplete sequence from Captain Nel.
That's correct.
And you didn't notice at the time that it was incomplete, even though it jumped from 228 to 231 in terms of numerical files.
No.
And we've seen from the affidavit of Captain Nel that when he gave you this footage, he must have known about the need for complete numerical sequences and files because he'd several weeks earlier been questioned by Brigadier Engelbrecht on precisely that issue.
Yes, I've seen that in his statement, yes.
And you agreed with the chairperson yesterday that the missing footage in 229 contains material that's relevant material for this commission, and indeed, in response to a question from the chairperson, is considerably more relevant than much of the other video material that we've seen.
Yes.
And you've just agreed with me that if one looks at the whole set of Captain Nell's videos, apart from these two missing videos, there are no videos that have content that calls out for an explanation from SABS.
From your perspective, yes, I agree.
And when you received these missing files from Captain Nell and you saw the relevant footage that they disclosed, you told the chairperson yesterday that you didn't ask Captain Nell for an explanation as to why he had withheld them from you in the first place.
Not that I can recall, because he wasn't the only person that was called in. There was a group of 3, 4, 5 that were called in, all to deliver their footage. I think it's within 2 days or even on the same day of each other.
Yes, but at a certain point you saw that you considered the footage which had been brought in, and you saw that there was now relevant material that had been brought in that had previously not brought in, and you didn't see fit to raise with Captain Nell why he hadn't brought it in the first place.
Well, I know it was in Rustenburg, in the office there. As I recall, he came in with Warrant Officer Barnard. He downloaded his videos. Warrant Officer Barnard downloaded his photos. I did observe the videos. I did see that they had what was stun grenades in them and so on. Initially, I was under the impression that they'd just been deleted. I can't recall, though, that I did ask him for an explanation. I thought that these were part of the discretionary issues that I mentioned in my statement that people thought to withhold themselves.
Sorry, Colonel, can I just take you back to something that you just said? You said initially you thought they had just been deleted. What did you mean by that?
When the evidence leaders brought it up that they were missing, when Captain Nell brought them in and gave them to us, obviously then I could see, and I was made aware then, that the sequence wasn't complete from what you guys had requested as well. And I watched them, and I can understand that possibly they were withheld because somebody thought that they were going to be detrimental to the police.
So you say you thought that they had been deleted after we asked for them, not before?
I think that question is ambiguous.
Yeah.
I think... were you going to complain about the ambiguity of the question too, Mr. Mendy? I think you better rephrase it because it's not clear what exactly you mean by after you've been alerted. So rephrase the question so the ambiguity is removed.
At what point did it occur to you that these videos may have been deleted?
When you sent it through to us?
When we sent what through to you?
The fact that there were videos missing from... Again, this is one person of about 4 to 5 different people that you had actually sent through to us and said that there are files missing. And people that are bringing their stuff in, I'm aware that some of them had private photographs on their cameras, etc. So my assumption is that it was just simply deleted, or things were deleted. I didn't take the time to scrutinize what Captain Nell or what his reasons were, but when he brought his footage in and it was shown to us, I obviously knew then that either he had saved a copy elsewhere, but it was not part of what he had given me on an earlier occasion.
I'm sorry, Colonel, I didn't quite understand. I can understand from what you told us yesterday that you thought stuff had been not given to you. Whether it was deleted or just not given to you is irrelevant for the purposes of what I'm asking you. They did that either because it was personal material that wasn't relevant, or because it was something that had happened that took the case no further. It was irrelevant in that sense, or I think you said it wasn't clear. Those are the three factors that operated in your mind, I think. Now, when the evidence leaders now called for this material, and it was brought in and you saw it, it must be apparent to you, one, it wasn't private material. Two, it wasn't material that was irrelevant in the sense of took the investigation no further. And it wasn't unclear. In fact, I think you've now said it was material that might have been regarded as prejudicial to the police. So I must confess, I would have expected you to have been irritated that he treated you in that fashion and not complied with your request and withheld material from you, which potentially could put you in an embarrassing position. And criticism could be directed against you, which you didn't deserve. So I would have expected you, frankly, to be irritated. Were you?
Commissioner, to be honest,
honest all the time.
Oh, sorry, yes. It's a case of seeing the members' possible loyalty to the police in that sense. I didn't question particularly why. The fact that he had brought the videos in, they were there now. He gave the explanation of what was on them. So I didn't ask him for an explanation of why not before. I mean, the explanation to me was, maybe, as I say, I'm assuming now, but that he was simply trying to protect the police in that matter.
Did you think that he was being guilty of what one could describe as mistaken loyalty to the police?
Chair, that also calls for speculation with respect. The witnesses...
No, with respect. I'm asking you what he thought at the time. That I'm not asking him to speculate now. That's a matter for us to decide. I'm asking him what he thought at the time. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Chair, I was pointing to the following. Once a witness says, I don't know why they were deleted, asking for possible explanations is asking for conjecture. Secondly, says, I did not ask them specifically, so he cannot even have say-so of those who deleted it. And that is the basis of my objection.
That wasn't the basis of my question. The question was what this witness thought at the time when these videos were brought to him, and which he'd previously not been given, and he then saw. So I don't think there's any substance to your objection. So I will repeat my question. It's what, I understand the point. Mr. Semeni is quite right that it's not appropriate for me to ask you what you think now. The question is, that's for us to decide at the end of the day. The question is, what you thought at the time when he came and brought these videos, which had been asked for. You saw what they were. And what's your answer to that?
Those were my thoughts. I assumed that he was trying to protect the police from something that may be derogatory or toward them.
Even that, for the record, Chair, that answer is prejudicial and has no foundation. Guessing what might have been the reason for it.
Some questions may flow from that, but whether it's prejudicial or not, it's a matter you can argue at the end of the day. You put it on record now. You flagged the point, as it were, so it won't be overlooked.
Well, Colonel, if I can pick up on that issue, there's an issue of a misguided sense of protecting the police, which is one thing, but the police operate through individuals. And the individual in charge of that helicopter was Brigadier Fritz. You'll accept that?
Yes.
So there's a separate issue of a misguided wish to protect Brigadier Fritz from something prejudicial, is there not?
No, Chair, that's objectionable.
Commissioner Hemraj points out that you haven't laid the factual foundation for that question. It's
the factual foundation for a...
He says what passed through his mind was this was mistaken loyalty to the police. Your point is that the police service operates through individuals, and the individuals who would have been protected, if that was the case, would have been the individuals in the helicopter or the person in charge of the helicopter. I take it that's
that is my point, yeah. Indeed. And if we're looking at the possibility of a mistaken desire to protect not just the SAPS, but the commander of that helicopter, Brigadier Fritz, given the respective relationships with Brigadier Fritz of yourself and Captain Nell, who would have been more likely to want to protect Brigadier Fritz from any embarrassment that flows from this footage.
This cannot be correct.
So I think that's a question for argument. I don't think it's a question you can ask him, frankly. I do be drawn, but
I do want to give this witness an opportunity because let me put it this way, Colonel. In due course, we'll have to hear from Captain Nell about whether he says he initially withheld videos 229 and 230 from you, and if so, why. We will, and his evidence will have to be heard by the Commission. But I do have to put it to you now that the position of the evidence leaders is that if Captain Nell does not corroborate your testimony in respect to how these videos came initially to be withheld from the Commission, the evidence leaders will have to submit that your testimony in this regard should be rejected by the Commission.
That's a hypothetical situation. I can understand what you're saying is that if Captain Nell comes and tells a different story, the criticism may then rebound from him onto this witness. But it's very hypothetical at the moment. I would have thought that if that's what Captain Nell says, because he may not. If Captain Nell comes and takes it on the chin and confirms what this witness says, well, then that's where the matter will end. If, of course, he tells a different tale, then it may be necessary for the Colonel to get an opportunity to answer criticism that may arise. But I don't think it's necessary for him to answer the criticism in anticipando, as it were, when the criticism may never eventuate.
Well, I don't need to take it further, Chairperson.
Is there perhaps a statement from Captain Nell with an explanation as to why the videos weren't provided, Mr. Chaskus?
There isn't as yet.
Has it been asked for?
It hasn't been asked for. We will ask for it.
It seems to me this witness is likely to be at the witness table, I would think probably till the end of the week. I think that's a realistic assumption. If you were to send a query today, you should get the answer by tomorrow, and you can then deal with it. If it's an answer which calls for an answer from this witness before he even leaves the witness table, in which case it won't be necessary for him to be recalled.
We will pursue that line, Chairperson.
I'm happy with that, sir.
If I can then move away from the Captain Nell videos and onto some other videos, and possibly the best starting point for this part of the cross-examination is that email of the 8th of November, J36, which sets out the queries of the evidence leaders and the response of the SABC team. It's page 189 of the Commissioner's bundle, and it's J36.
Remind me the file. File 1, isn't it?
It's file 1.
Thank you.
And Colonel, if I can ask you to start not on the front page, but on the second page where...
Mr. Chaskelson, file 1, page 189, is actually photographs. Might it be another file for us?
It must be file 3. I apologize. In the meantime, can I ask that J36 be called up onto the screen?
It is file 3. It is page 189 of file 3.1. Have you got it in front of you, Colonel?
I have, Chairperson.
I wonder if we could try to get it up on the screen. But if we can start on the second page of the email, which in fact reflects what the request of the evidence leaders was in relation to the videos. And there are photographs that are the first 3 lines of that page, and then come the video requests. Full set of Captain Nell's videos, those have been dealt with. Full set of POP's videos, M2 series 13 to 16 August. full set of POPs picture series 13 to 16 August. These, Colonel, you'll recall, turned out to be copies of the deleted files that we discussed yesterday. You say you've never viewed them. For present purposes, we're not going to take that further until we've looked at the hard drive that you gave us yesterday. The fourth set is a full set of POPs numbered MTS series 13 to 16 August. And the fourth set is cell phone video of Captain Malatsi, it should have been Mklatsi, 350 to 365. And the response that we see on the first page of the email from the SAP's attorneys on 8 November says, we refer to the meeting that was held on 7 November 2 between Brigadier Pretorius, Lieutenant Colonel Scott, Colonel Victor, Advocate Wesley, and yourself per video phone. We've dealt with the video phone and we don't need to go there before. Let's start with the POPs videos, which are the last item on that list. Full set of POPs videos M2 series and MTS series were loaded down on computer of Advocate Wesley. Now, can I ask that we call up first the M2 series that was given to Advocate Wesley on the 7th of November. That's J21. And screenshots are on pages 105 to 107.
I didn't get the number. J what?
J21.
Thank you.
Pages 105 to 107.
Of which file?
Which file?
File 1.
Thank you.
J21, and there are the thumbnails on this page and then 2 pages of directory properties, so it will be J21.1 to J21.3.
My page 105 is a directory. Page 105 and 106 directory entries of file 1.
What we have up then is 107. So 105 would be the directory entries of file properties view of that directory. This would be the thumbnails. Colonel, will you confirm that those are the files that were given to the evidence leaders on the 7th of August as the POPs videos M2 series?
I'll have to rely on your accuracy. We've handed over many times to yourself to say it's those exact ones, but I'll rely on your accuracy to say so, yes.
Well, we do say so, but there's nothing in those files that you say, no, we'd never given you these as the M2 series.
You're correct, yes.
And then if we can go to the MTS series, which will be J20, and which are at pages 108 to 110. The MTS series. And again, Colonel, would you confirm that in respect of the MTS, that these are the files that you handed to the evidence leaders on the 7th of November as the outstanding files from the MTS series?
Are you referring to all of them being outstanding? Or is it just to complete
as the complete set of the MTS series?
Again, I'll take your word for it, is what we handed over to you, yes.
And if they can be J20, then the last item that we haven't addressed on that email is Captain Mklatsi's cell phone videos. And this is a bit more complicated because they came in dribs and drabs. So if I can put up on the screen the original set of videos that was provided to the evidence leaders in relation to the cell phone footage from Captain Mkhatsi, that will be J 25.1, J 25.1 at page 104 of that file. And Colonel, do you recognize that set of videos from Captain Mkhatsi as the original incomplete set of videos that was furnished to the evidence leaders?
Yes.
Now, if one looks at that sequence, we immediately picked up that 353 was missing from the sequence. 351, 352, 353 isn't there, and then it goes 354, 355, 356, 357, 358, 359, all the way through to 365. So we had asked for a full set, but you had also explained to us that not only was 353 missing, but 350 was missing. So if you go back to that email, J 36, you'll see that the request that was made there was for Captain Mkhatsi videos 350 to 365, and the existence of 350 was something to which we'd been alerted by you. It didn't emerge ex facie, the incomplete set.
If I can just maybe also place for the record, this request, if one would, is sent through a nodal point to the police. It's not to say that because it deals with video and photo footage and that which is missing, that it gets directed directly to me. Most of these requests initially tried to get dealt with by Brigadier Pretorius, and at that time Colonel Visser was sitting there. I had already, way back at Roots, handed over the duties of being a nodal point with all these videos and photos, etc. There were other occasions when they were still brought to me, but immediately I would download them to look at them and give them over to the SAP's master hard drive. But specifically, if there are things mentioned in the email, it's not an email I, for instance, typed. So to reflect it towards myself, that because I'm trying as hard as I can to recall things that have been said, but in the email itself, I didn't type that mail. Somebody else obviously wrote that there, because I'm struggling to recall the 350 and missing videos as you putting them there. I was not involved in getting the statements from these members that are also attached to these emails.
Colonel, it's slightly embarrassing for me to concede this, to admit this, but if you roll down, I was the one who actually wrote that, but my name appears at the bottom. But the 350 to 365, but...
The point he's making is that if you look at that, the exhibits to which we referred, one sees that 353 is missing. But he says that the reason he didn't just ask for 353 or the series from 351 to 365, but the series from 350 to 365, because you actually said to him, there's actually another one missing as well. Not only 553, but also 50. So he's, as it were, complimenting you on drawing his attention to a missing thing that he didn't know about. So,
I'm just struggling to recall that, Chairperson. I'm struggling to recall that, if it was a conversation or I don't know.
Well, maybe we can go a little further, because nothing is going to turn on this. I merely wanted to point out that we didn't divine that 350 was missing. We were generously informed of this fact by SAPS. So if we go forward, and maybe if we go back up to the email, to the first page of that email, which describes the second sequence of this chain. So there the SAPS legal team says, in respect of Captain Mkhatsi, all footage were provided to Advocate Wesley. The only one outstanding was video clip number 50. That should be 350, would you accept?
Yes.
Which was taken on cell phone and could not open. Arrangements were made that the member will be called on 8 November 2012 to download the image again directly on the computer of Advocate Chastelson. And in fact, what we received on the 7th of November was even more than we'd asked for, because if I can take you to J 25.2 and 25.3, we got not only 353, but we also got 348 and 349. So can we go to J 252 and 253?
Page?
And that is page 102 to 103.
Of file 1.
Of file 1, the thumbnails and the directories.
Yes.
So SABC obligingly gave us not only the 353 that we had asked for and the explanation that 350 would be forthcoming in due course, but also 348 and 349, about which we were at that stage ignorant. Do you recall that?
Not personally, no. As I say, I wasn't working specifically with this.
Yeah, but all of this happened at a meeting at which you were present, and there's nothing that that I'm putting to you that is at odds with what you recall of that meeting. I wasn't present at that meeting.
Yes.
Now the email. So at that stage, all that was missing was 350. The email records that there was some difficulty getting 350 off the phone. But by 8 November, SABC apparently were able to get 350 off the phone. And they gave us a copy of 350 on a memory stick, so we then had a full set that ran from 348 to 365. And that appears at... Well, if that can be J 25.4 and 25.5 at pages 100 to 101. And that then was what appeared to be the full set. Now, can I ask you, who at SABC would have been responsible for getting 350 off the iPhone of Captain McClatchy? I take it wasn't you.
No, it wasn't, no.
Who would have been responsible for that? Who would have obtained that video, which was initially difficult to download and then able to be downloaded?
I think, well, I would assume it would be between Colonel Visser and Brigadier Pretorius, but more Colonel Visser, who was working with the hard drive at this time.
And do you know who was dealing with Captain Mklatsi on behalf of SABC in relation to these requests that we kept bombarding you with?
Again, I can speculate it would have been going through Brigadier Pretorius. There may have been call-up instructions sent out to have him come in with his phone. I do recall at one stage that he was trying to send it either via mail or something to that effect. I know he tried to send it to Captain Ryland. I'm not sure that worked either. So he had to, as far as I know, come in to actually bring his phone in. But it wasn't my dealing, as I say. It would have been channeled through the structure which we have running, which would have come in through Brigadier Pretorius and the necessary arrangements made that way.
We may in due course have to take this further with Brigadier Pretorius, but I wonder if the SABC legal team can possibly find out who it was who received video file.
It's not his head, it will be done.
Thank you, Chairperson. Now, if we can move to the properties view of this directory, which is the previous page. So that is the properties view of the directory as it was complete by the 8th of November. And what immediately struck us when we looked at these properties is that it appeared that SABC hadn't been able to get the original metadata, if I can call it that, off the files, which describes the original dates of when the shots were taken. So if one looks down that date column, the dates are either on the 17th of October or in respect of the 3 files that were provided at the meeting of the 7th, those dates are the 6th of November, and the one that came on the 8th, which is 350, as the date of the 8th. So these weren't original dates and times. So the utility of these files was reduced for the evidence leaders. And we then asked Captain Mklatsi to come in with his cell phone because we thought that we would be able to get the original times off his cell phone. Now, I've actually got ahead of myself because what I really wanted to do was just to describe the process. So let's go back to the POPs files because Sergeant Mklatsi is a different story later on, and I would like to know where that file 350 came from before we embark on that line of cross-examination. And if we go to the POPs files, the evidence leaders have a number of queries and concerns about the POPs videos that SABC has made available to us and to the parties. And the first one concerns what was put on the SABC hard drive that was given to us and what wasn't. So if I can ask that Triple J 17.1 be called up. Have you got a reference for it? That is a screenshot of the 40 series that we discussed yesterday that you confirmed that you downloaded. It's page 121. That you confirmed that you downloaded from the POPs operators on the 17th of August. Triple J 17.1. And maybe if we can go to 17.3, which is the thumbnail view, which is up on screen, that's at page 123 of file 1. Now, I'm going to confine these questions to the files in the 40 series, which are in the top row of this picture of thumbnails. Are you familiar with any of the videos that you see on those thumbnails from 42 MTS to 48 MTS?
I think 47 looks like Mr. Matunjwa, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, if I can interject there, you'll find that that's the source file for your slide 162 of your presentation.
Yes. And I think he may be speaking to the SABC there where he's requesting the loud hailer.
That's absolutely correct, yes. Do you recognize 42 because that's also in your presentation?
It's a bit small, but...
Well, if I can just put to you that that's the source file for your slide 157 of the presentation, the behavior of the crowd at 10:45.
Okay.
And 48 is also a source file for your presentation. That is the very lengthy address by the AMCU organizers at the meeting at the Kopi around about sometime between midday and 1:30. We can get an exact time later. Do you recognize 46? It's not in your presentation.
No, but I would imagine that's Mr. Matunjwa's vehicle.
Yes, that's footage of Mr. Matunjwa shortly after his arrival at the Kopi on the 16th. Would you agree with me that the videos that we see from 42 to 48 contain material, if one looks at the whole set from 42 to 48, that within there is some very relevant material for this commission?
Yes.
You see, our concern in this regard is that these videos were not included on the SABC hard drive that was made available to the parties. None of them. So can I give you a screenshot of the hard drive in the form that it was given to us and the parties when we received it? And that will be Triple J 23.1 at page 181 to 182. 181 to 182. File 1. Can we call up Triple J 23.1? Now, this is a screenshot that we've taken from the SABS hard drive in the form that it was given to the evidence leaders by SABS. And we have captured all of the POPs MTS files that were given to us relating to the 16th in the screenshot. The 40 series wasn't there. Do you accept that?
Besides 44.
44 turned out not to be part of the 40 series. 44 turned out to be a file that dealt with Mr. Noki on the 14th.
Well, as you're showing me on screen, it appears not to be there, yes.
The question accurately formulated is that the 40 series, except for 44, was not included.
No, with respect to that, Mr. Chairperson, that 44 is not part of the 40 series that we have described as the 40 series. The 40 series is the series of videos that were taken on one of the POPs cameras on the 16th. This is another file called 44 MTS. Possibly if we can go back to see what...
Probably nothing turns on it. If something does, Mr. Semenya will deal with re-examination, but let's not spend time on it unless it's important.
It's not. But let's just go back to your testimony yesterday dealing with the passage of the POPs files from the POPs video operators all the way through to the parties at this commission. You testified yesterday that you downloaded the 40 series onto your laptop on the 17th, and that would have included, and that did, you testified, included all of the 40 series files taken on the 16th.
And I'm speaking from recollecting as best I can from my memory. All right.
But yesterday we went into this in some detail, and we in fact distinguished between the two cards, and you recalled that there were two different cards from which you downloaded.
I can recall there were two cards. Specifically at what time is again open to objective evidence, because if I can be shown by properties, that's acceptable. But to recall from my memory back to times when we'd gone through what we'd gone through, we weren't sleeping as much as we should have, and to recall exactly when and what they gave me is difficult. So to go back to computer evidence, to show objectively what was given to me at that time, I think would be more relevant and accurate for that matter.
Well, Colonel, we have a couple of difficulties with that. I mean, the only way we can go back to that is if you give us your laptop and we have the laptop forensically examined to determine when the 40 series first made its way onto your laptop. If you're willing to do that, we would welcome that opportunity.
Because I've done that last night. I've gone into a file called Ops Platinum, and the modified, for instance, 110101, which I'm sure the camera's timing must have been out.
Colonel, if you're looking at a file that says 110101, then you're looking at files that were taken by Warrant Officer Nong probably on the 14th, maybe on the 15th, which was before he'd reset the time of the camera. But all of the files that were in the 40 series, if we can go back, just because we can show you the properties of the 40 series. If we can go back to Triple J17. At page 121, can we call that up on the screen? Triple J17. We're having difficulties getting Triple J17 up on the screen. And if we can go to page 122 of the Commissioner's bundle, which deals with the 40 series. So,
have you not got it? I'll lend you my page. If you haven't got it, I'll lend you my page. That's 122.
Okay, you just follow it. This will be 17.2. 17.3. This will be 17.2. This will be Triple J 17.2, but we don't want to see the thumbnails. We want to see the file properties.
Properties appear to be on 122, is that correct?
That is correct, on 122, but what's up on the screen is not the file properties. Yes, now we're all on the same page. So, Colonel, these are the file properties of the 40 series. And they start on 042 with a file that has the time 10:45, 16 September 2012, and you'll recall yesterday that we discussed the incorrect September on all of these files, and we agreed that it was a mistaken month, it should be August. And I put to you that this was the source file for your slide 157, and if we in fact go to slide 157, we'll see, and we don't need to have it up on screen if it's going to take time, but you'll see that the heading that you gave to slide 157 was the crowd's behavior at 10:45, which matches the time on the file. So these are files, video files that were taken by the POPs operators, or one of the POPs operators, on the morning of the 16th at the copy between 10:45 and the last one is 12:18, 048, if we're talking about the MTS series. Now, I would have imagined that those are par excellence the files that you would have wanted to see the next morning when the POPs, or the next afternoon I think it was, when the POPs video operators came to you to download their files.
Well, I would want to see, for the purposes of building the NASCOM's presentation at that time, it was what was relevant to that presentation. But whatever they would give, obviously, I took.
But we went through the exercise yesterday with you, and you confirmed that you had downloaded 2 separate cards. And you do reconfirm that?
From what I'm recalling, yes. But this is why I'm asking to maybe consider objective evidence from my hard drive, from my computer, so we can verify that accurately, because I'm speaking from memory, and it's over a year ago. At times we were tired, and to recall that accurately, I may be incorrect, but I may be correct.
Colonel, sorry to interrupt you. I was proposing to take the tea adjournment in 5 minutes, but if it would help, so that we don't spend 5 minutes on speculative cross-examination, I'll take the adjournment now. You can look at your computer, see if you can find the objective evidence. I take it, if necessary, you can show it to Mr. Shaskerson. And when we resume at, say, 11:15, unless you need more time, in which case you can tell me, then we will hopefully know whether the objective data to which you refer is available, and you then will be able to give us evidence that you're happier with than evidence based on reconstruction and memory. Would that be acceptable?
Yes.
Are you happy with that, Mr. Shaskerson?
Absolutely, Chair.
We'll take the tea adjournment until 11:15.
You say personal which you will have resources.
It's something I put my files on.
Have a chain. I bring my cell phone. Download it on my cell phone. This other hard drive. I just don't understand. Because you were able to go with it as not that actually at this stage, I'm no longer the I'm finding myself as well not to crucify this is what I say full facility in charge of you sort of I just want us to compare with judges. They say have a look at your computer, which you have done. Your computer, you are able to say that day.
That's 2 days hard. So I downloaded computers and said,
as of the day to the first 46 and today.
What is happening is the laptop got copied over to the first hard drive, then got one thing to make up space. The first hard drive then got copied over to the second hard drive. We can show you that those files are on the second hard drive, but that doesn't tell us when they first arrived. The only way to answer the Criminal's question is really to get someone who was more technical knowledge than any of us to go into the hard drive of his laptop to look and see when was, or whether those files were ever there, and so on. So I don't think well, that may yes, but you see there would be two different. If the cops don't show these where it's fast comes is two separate numbers of cops there. And if the cops came around and did the cops close to and we would have gone there the next day, and the first place they'd have gone in would be that laptop. Now, they've been copied all over the show. I mean, I can show you lots of different places on the current version of the hard drive where those files exist. That's because stuff gets copied backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. The only way to categorically did the Fox people do that the next stage of doing that is either to ask their statement seconded, or to get an expert to go into it. You have to get that because that would be the machine because they're an expert. Now, I don't know how, from our perspective, it's not an absolutely critical issue. I don't know. I mean, one way or another, they should have come to us at some stage in the process. And they didn't, we mentioned it from London. So it's the 40 series we got from London. So and they weren't part of the SABC that was originally given to us. So frankly, it's not a major issue. For me, Colonel Scott says they have been on the SABC hard drive at some stage between then and now, and they're still on the SABC hard drive. And when we got stuff from London, I forget the exact dates, but between London and it's full Supplementary information. Well, you see, again, what one can see from what I can see from the properties when files were taken. And I can't see when they were first put onto a hard drive unless I take that hard drive and send it to my expert who will use it.
This is something
These files are real, and the files that I'm talking about are actually real from people who are only working on SABC in several different places. Okay, well, then that's... Well, let me give that back to you. Like I said, it's not a major issue it's not a major issue at some stage in the chain between, I understand it's a major issue for you, it's not a major issue for us because we're just wanting to make a point about there has been a breakdown in the SABC chain. That these things, SABC computers are using to us. Now, you must give the testimony that you must give. The only way we can actually categorically say that properly operated didn't do stuff to you by looking at the hard drive or the laptop and
well, I'm willing to do that, which says I have nothing to do with this. There's other files in there which are doing sorts of things countries that have done. So I need to be first. If you don't have a rather easily interesting search
well, let me... This problem with overlooked information is so bulky and it takes so long is that realistically, as a project someone is only going to be capable of being
look, I mean, what can I say? You must decide what
you need to be sitting next to it. It's logistically complicated.
I can't put anything about the content. He says that he made a mistake in one part, then he says so. That's his thing. Okay, all right, thanks, bye.
So, this I think is a true reflection, at least 2 days after the call. I actually think this is what they carried over onto the big external hard drive. And I'll tell you from my computer in 2 days after. And somehow that's, I think that's which is all this stuff. And that's, I mean, it hasn't been asked for. It's a personal matter.
Yes.
It's open to be taken to details.
Well, look, I think you need to, I think for your sake you need to give that explanation. I may need to ask you further questions that flow. Let's see where it goes. I mean, like I said to Ish, from our perspective, our concern is that there are a set of files that SABC had that were very relevant in the images. Now, it's not a particular issue for us. I appreciate that issue, that the risk of that is there whether those files were downloaded on the 17th or at a later stage.
Ja, misschien is het ja. En ek wil nie dat krap in my kind bly. Dit sou maak ek
That may be the best. That may be the best. Sorry.
The commission resumes. We took a bit longer in coming back because we saw that the witness and Mr. Shaskerson were still in conversation. I take it the problem that was being discussed has now been sorted out. Is that correct? Mr. Shaskerson?
Mr. Chairperson, we don't have a short-term solution because from our perspective, the only way that we will be able to show forensically whether those particular files were downloaded onto Colonel Scott's laptop is to have Colonel Scott's laptop hard drive forensically examined, and that is a very lengthy process. There are also sensitive documents on the laptop, so it will have to take place either in the presence of Colonel Scott or under some other type of controlled circumstances.
That matter is being addressed. We don't have to get resolution on the matter now. You can continue with your cross-examination, can you?
Yes, we can continue with the cross-examination.
Well, before you do so, let me remind the witness you're still under oath, Colonel. Yes, Mr. Shaskerson.
Well, Colonel, we're going to have to come back to this particular chain of evidence, as it were, at a later stage, but let me put to you what I see to be the possible breaks in the chain. The first possible break in the chain would be if the POPs operator who took the footage in the 40 series didn't in fact come to you to download it as he was supposed to be on the 17th. That's a possible break in the chain.
That's so.
In that event, it would never have got onto your laptop hard drive.
Laptop, yes.
But at some stage thereafter, it did come into the custody of the SAPS because videos from that series were then incorporated in the presentation.
That is so, yes.
That's correct. So if that were the break in the chain, we would have to explain, well, one, we would have to establish that that was the break, and two, we would have to establish how that break was subsequently cured by SAP so that they got custody of these videos. And then there would be the third question, which is why those videos were not put onto the hard drive that was made available to the evidence leaders and the parties. That's the first possibility. The second possibility is that they were downloaded onto your laptop. You copied them over to your external hard drive, the hard drive that we were calling the Scott hard drive yesterday. Thereafter, as you said, sorry, Colonel, you're nodding. I think for the record, you must actually speak.
Just acknowledging what you're saying.
Yes, but if you can do it out loud.
If a nod means yes, you must say yes, because the transcribers won't see you, so they won't be able to put on the transcript brackets witness nods, close brackets.
Commissioner, it's maybe just a habit. It's taught in negotiations. It's positive communication. You're listening when you nod. So.
The answer that normally is given by witnesses who communicate that is, I hear you.
Colonel, I hope these negotiations succeed and we don't have to move to the tactical phase. So we were dealing with the second possibility, which is that the POPs video operator, be it Warrant Officer Massinio or Warrant Officer Ndlovu, who took that footage, downloaded it onto your laptop on the 17th, or indeed possibly a bit later, you copied it over onto the SAPS hard drive that you had in your custody up until the week commencing the 27th. You're with me thus far. You're assenting, yes. You then deleted at some stage in this process, you deleted what you had copied over because you wanted to free up space on your laptop.
Yes.
And the file may have been lost somewhere between your hard drive and the Brigadier Pretorius hard drive that became the SAPS archive sometime in the week of the 27th of August. That's the second
That's the
possibility.
second scenario. That's also a possibility.
Now, for that to have happened, it would have had to have been deleted. One of two things would have had to have happened. Either it would have had to have been deleted off your external hard drive before the transfer took place. Are you aware of any deletions that you made of video material on the hard drive? So we can discount that.
Yes.
The other possibility is that you didn't copy everything over onto Brigadier Pretorius's hard drive. Is that a possibility?
Well, looking at the range of possibilities, it is a possibility, yes, but highly unlikely.
Well, how did you do the copying of your external Scott hard drive to the Brigadier Pretorius hard drive?
You know, you're asking me to recall back then, but I'm assuming it would have been the same way I would do it now, and that would simply be by taking everything I have and dragging it over.
So it would be unlikely that you would have missed files in that process?
Yes.
It's highly unlikely. It's
Highly unlikely, yes.
Highly unlikely. So the third possibility, am I on 3? The third possibility would be it made its way onto
The fourth,
Brigadier Pretorius's hard drive, but was subsequently removed from that hard drive, or at least removed from the selection of files on that hard drive that were copied over to the evidence leaders and the parties. Now you can't speak to that because you weren't in custody of that hard drive.
I can confirm it's a possibility, though.
You can confirm it's a possibility. Whichever the possibilities it is, we know that footage which was taken by SABC, which was in SABC's possession, which continued to be used by SABC and regarded by SABC as being relevant, wasn't made available to the evidence leaders and the parties. You'll accept that?
Well, I'll accept that, to the best of my knowledge, what was available on the SABC hard drive at that time, when Colonel Victor handed it over, all of it was handed over.
Sorry, Colonel, I didn't follow that answer. To your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, what was on the SABC hard drive at the time of giving it over to the evidence leaders is what was given over. Nothing was held back.
So we ought to have received everything that was on the hard drive when it was handed over to the evidence leaders, but plainly we didn't, because we didn't get the 40 series which SABC had and was using as source material for its presentation.
I hear what you're saying, and look, I'm not to try and find explanations for that, but it's possible that SABC got that, but Colonel Victor Visser would have to testify to that they also got it from the Section 205, from the Lonman footage, probably the same place you got it from the Lonman footage coming in.
Yes, but a whole lot of other material that was obtained through the Lonman 205 subpoena was put onto the SABC hard drive that was given to us. So all of those CCTV cameras, for instance, on 7 different days and many different cameras, we did receive.
I know that I've got certain Lonman CCTV cameras that were given to me while I was still at Marikana, so there was certain of that footage which is outside of a 205.
All right. Well, Colonel, we'll pursue this further, and if needs be, we can make the arrangements for forensic examination of various hard drives at a later stage. I want to move to a related topic, and I want to take you back to November last year when you presented Exhibit L to the Commission. And you may recall that shortly after your presentation, we raised a concern with you about a misleading time sequence in slides 163 to 169 of Exhibit L. And I wonder if we can get 163 to 169 called up. Colonel, and you'll recall that slides 163 to 168 are the speeches of the 6 protesters, and if we can link them to the POPs videos, they are in fact videos 116 to 118 in the 100 MTS series and 120 to 122 in the same series. So if we go back to the thumbnail of the 100 MTS series, which would be Triple J 17, if I recall correctly. If we can go to Triple J 17. Can we call up Triple J 17? Well, it's page 123 of the file 1 that the commissioners have, but if we can just look at
I can see it on the screen, sir.
Slides, it's now called up. If one looks at slides 116 to 118 on the screen, one will see the thumbnails of the videos that appear in slides 163 to 165. And if one looks at 120 to 122, we will see the thumbnails of the videos that appear on slides 167 to 169. Are you satisfied with that assessment?
Yes.
And for the record, Chairperson, the relevant videos are exhibits CC13 to CC18 already in the bundle. And slide 169 on Exhibit L is the lengthy speech of the AMCU organizers and Mr. Matunjwa, which is Exhibit CC7, for which the source file is video 48 on the MTS series up in front of you. Will you accept that?
Yes.
Now, it's been a long time since we saw these videos in the Commission, and maybe I'd like to refresh everybody's memory of the sequence as it was presented by yourself and in Commission, by playing first slide 168 and then the first 10 seconds of slide 169. So can we do that now? Slide 168 and the first 10 seconds of slide 169. And if I might ask, we don't have volume. I wonder if we do have volume, if we could get volume and start again, but for...
We have subtitles, apparently.
And just the first 10 seconds of this video. This video is so... This is the hyperlinked video because it was so big and we seem to have difficulties playing it. It may not be necessary to play it because I can make my point without playing it. Can we just abandon video 169? Colonel, would it be fair to say that that what we saw in 168 was what I would describe as a short murderous speech by protester 6, indicating that he wants policemen who do not leave to be killed, to be finished off?
I think that's an interpretation, yes.
Well, if we were to be able to play 169, what we would see is that the very first transcribed portion of the AMCU organizer who is speaking in 169 says, "That has to be respected." Do you recall that?
No.
Well, then we may have to play 169 and find...
I'll take your word for it, but I don't recall it, no.
Well, it is what it says.
Did we have a transcript of this, Mr. Jasperson? Can't we go there, rather?
Colonel, take it from me that the first transcribed portion that we see in 169 is "that has to be respected." I'll find my copy of the video in the adjournment, and if needs be, we can play it after lunch.
It may be somewhere in the transcript. When the video was shown, there was an interpretation by Mr. Mshangu of what was said. It's an exhibit. It was handed in, as far as I remember.
Mr. Chairperson, my concern is that it may be that particular translation starts only where Mr. Matunjwa's speech begins in the middle of this video. Well, but if it starts at the beginning, what it will say is "that has to be respected."
Right.
Now, Exhibit L suggests that the AMCU organizers and Mr. Matunjwa followed immediately on from Protester 6. Will you accept that?
It is shown that way in Exhibit L. It's not maliciously shown that way.
Well, it's impression, I suppose, that Exhibit L creates, doesn't it? You've got the murderous speech, and then you've got the AMCU organizer speaking, and then I think someone else, and then Mr. Matunjwa. That's the sequence in which these videos are shown in Exhibit L.
It is so, Chairperson, but with respect, this is the first time I've even been made aware that this is I've never viewed it this way.
Well, Colonel, can I take you back to what you told the Commission when you were actually presenting these videos? That you'll find in the transcript of 9 November, page 1253. And if I might read what you said to the Commissioners, you said the following: when the AMCU president went forward, members of the protester group were first allowed to address the group themselves. And what you'll see is blue stripes on your presentation, but those will actually come across as subtitles as we had it interpreted and placed onto the video clip. So you informed the Commission that the protester speeches preceded the AMCU speeches.
And yes, I know where you're going, in the sense that the objective evidence in the details of the videos will show otherwise, but that's really how I understood it at that time.
We'll get there in due course.
Okay.
Let's start at the end point. Do you accept that sequence that is suggested by Exhibit L and that you stated to the Commission is an incorrect sequence?
Yes, just confirm, the thumbnails are all of the same camera. It wasn't two different cameras that were on screen when you showed the thumbnails.
No, you'll go back. There are two different cameras. If we can go back to J17, one is from the 40 series and one is from the 100 series. Well, not one is from 100 series. Several are from the 100 series. So if we can go back. So the speech of Mr. Matunjwa is the last file in the 40 series. That's 48 MTS.
Okay.
The speeches of the protesters are 116 to 118 MTS and 120 to 122 MTS.
I see that, and I can only explain that possibly is why. Being two different series, that they weren't in sequence in that case there, and at the moment they're in name sequence and not time sequence, but I will take your word for it that it's possible that it is in a different time sequence.
Well, let's look at the time properties, because we can put that to bed with the next page of this exhibit, JJ17, I think it's 17.2.
I think the point I wanted to make was, if it was of the same camera, I would have been more aware that it was running before the protesters. Being from a separate camera, it's not that evident to me.
We'll get there in due course, but let's take it one step at a time. Let's first clarify what the true facts are. The true facts are that the time of the AMCU speeches, as appears from 048 MTS, was 12:18 on the 16th. You accept that?
Yes.
And if we go to the next page, which shows the 100 MTS series, can we scroll down a page of the properties to the 100 MTS? It's 17.3. So if we 17.1, okay, we've got the right page up on screen. If we look at protester 1, that's 116 MTS, and that speech starts at 12:56. You'll accept that's correct?
Yes.
And protester 6, who gave the short murderer's speech, that's 122 MTS, and that speech started at 1:10
I see, so yes.
Now, we know from the reconciliation table of times, JJ37, that these two cameras are only 38 seconds apart. So it's not as though one of them has a time that's radically out and the other one isn't. So these times are broadly equivalent with one another. They are, in fact, 38 seconds apart. You accept that?
Yes.
So then would you accept that protester 6's speech, 122 MTS, or exhibit CC18, was actually more than 50 minutes after the first AMCU organizer started his speech in exhibit CC7, which is 48 MTS?
Yes.
And so, not asking for explanations at this stage, just looking to establish the facts, would you accept then that the sequencing of exhibit L in this respect, first of all, was objectively wrong?
Yes.
And second of all, I want to put it to you that it was highly prejudicial to AMCU. Would you accept that?
Well, if you're asking my opinion on whether it was highly prejudicial to AMCU, as I say, I wasn't even aware of that it ran from that guy to what somebody would interpret to this needs to be respected or something. That never crossed my line of thought.
I'm asking not about your intentions, not about your subjective opinion in putting it together that way. I'm asking you about objectively. Would you accept that objectively it is highly prejudicial, that sequence was highly prejudicial to AMCU?
Objectively, I haven't got an option but to say yes.
Right. Now one of the things that struck me as odd in relation to your missequencing of these slides in Exhibit L is that one of the hallmarks of Exhibit L is an attempt to be precise in relation to times.
Yes,
would you accept that's correct?
We tried as best as we could, yes.
And most of the slides with photographs in the slides have times in their titles. Would you accept that?
And that's the point, the photographs do, yes.
Well, it's not just videos. If we go to, and we've already been there, I think it was slide 157. For which the source file was 42 of the MTS series. That's a video file which is headed "The Crowd's Behavior at 10:45."
Yes.
And when we go to the properties of the source file, which is 42 MTS, we see it is indeed a file taken at 10:45. Now, when you were putting together Exhibit L, you were aware of the time properties of photo and video files, were you not?
I was, yes.
And in your statement at paragraph 102, paragraph 32.4, you say that in the division of labor between yourself and Colonel Fisher in relation to the presentation, you were specifically responsible for sequencing and the film and photographic evidence.
Yes.
You recall that, and you reconfirm that.
Yes.
Now, I want to put to you that it's not possible to sequence photographic and video files without looking at the file properties. Would you accept that?
I accept that. Maybe I'm just stumped at the fact because there was no intent to do this, or there was no. I know that also those files, and I'm just wondering whether that could have had an impact on it. Once they were sent for translation, were returned to us, and whether that wasn't the sequencing on the file we received them in translation, I'm not sure.
Sorry, can you just clarify that? Just repeat that answer. Or let me tell you what I understood you to say. You sent those files you sent for translation, and you think that you may have been confused because when you got them back from the translators, they may have been in that sequence?
If I can establish this, I concede that they are in the wrong sequence. What I'm saying is that it was not maliciously done by me, and I'm trying to provide a plausible answer as to why the sequencing is in that way.
Well, you earlier suggested that a plausible answer may be that they weren't part of the same sequence.
Same camera.
Same cameras, different cameras. But presumably if you're checking file properties, you will see what the file properties are and what the times are, whichever cameras they're on.
Presumably so, yes. But like I'm saying, if I had checked and made myself aware of those file properties, I would surely have sequenced them the other way. Again, it's very possibly an oversight on my part.
Well, it seems to be a bigger oversight. Well, there's more to the oversight, let me put it that way. Because if you'd looked through other files in the 100 series, that sequence would have been clear to you. Take 103 and 104 MTS. If we can call up 103 and 104 MTS. Oops. No, it seems that they're 17.103 and 17.104 in the Triple J series. What these videos in the 100 series will show is footage taken during the first AMCU organizer's speech, and in particular footage of the notorious Kill the Noom song that we also hear on 048 MTS. possibly if we can play 103. Before we do so, possibly before we play it, if we can play it. But we do need sound first. So are we still in the same video, or are we jumping ahead here? Sorry, my mistake. This is the same video. Maybe if we can stop at this point. Do you recall the "We Will Kill Num" song?
Somewhere yes, somebody's testified or spoken about those were the words being used, yes.
Well, you'll find them transcribed in the file of 048 MTS, which made its way into Exhibit 169.
It's a slide 169.
Slide 169. Slide 169. The NUM organisers and Mr. Matunjwa's speech. Did you see the clip in the middle of that video of a man in a black jacket?
You said the NUM organisers. I think you meant the AMCO organisers.
I beg your pardon, it was the AMCO organisers. Did you see the man in the black jacket in the middle of that clip?
Are you talking about where it broke for a moment?
Indeed, where it broke for a moment.
Yes.
Did you recognize him as one of the AMCU speakers?
No.
You'll find that he does appear as an AMCU speaker in slide 108. In slide 169, file 48.mts. Let's go to 104.mts.
Sinani asebenzi othi kayikhapha size nayo sithi comrade ikhapha asizothi comrade ithi seyinikwe phaa ikhapha thina sifuna ukwenza injeniswekile asizoyenza lona sizawuza nayo injalo sithi comrade iyakhakha nansi xa ibambe ithiwani na asizothi sithi siyithathe phaa ikhapha.
Can we stop the video? Did you see the man in the black jacket again?
I think you need to pre-warn me. I'm looking at a lot of people as we're going.
And the speaker in the black jacket?
I'll take your word that he was there.
Let's look at possibly a more obvious clip, which is 108.mts.
Looking for the man in the black jacket?
No, now we're looking for Mr. Matunjwa. It's a very short clip. It's 1 second, 2 seconds, but the identity of the speaker is unmistakable. 108.mts, CC8. You can just stop. We don't need to play it. Do you recognize that,
yes,
that man? Who is he?
That's, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Matunjwa.
Now, that is Mr. Matunjwa giving his speech at the Kopi on the 16th.
I take it he's giving his first speech.
His speech at lunchtime. And if we go to the file properties of 108.mts, which would be 17.2, And we can see there that clip from Mr. Matundra's speech took place at 12:27, 108.mts.
I see that, yes.
So it's not an issue of two separate sources of footage. In fact, on the one source of footage, we can see Mr. Matundra making a speech at 12:27, which is approximately or more than 40 minutes before Protester 6's speech at 122 MTS at 110. You accept that?
Yes.
So I've taken you to 103 MTS, 104 MTS, and 108 MTS to suggest that there was another way that you could have seen that the sequencing in Exhibit L was incorrect.
Considering I was looking at the properties of the time sequencing.
But we earlier discussed how one does time sequencing, and you conceded that without looking at the properties one cannot do time sequencing.
We spoke about the earlier where it showed the crowd behavior at 10:45, and I say that it is according to the time of the video. I'm not saying that I specifically looked at the times of these videos, because what you're referring to, or what you're saying, which is going to prejudice the AMCU side, is the fact that, I think the words we must respond to.
We must respect that.
We must respect that. But if maybe one can go to a version of the presentation which had the slides inserted before the interpretation was even there, which would have been done then by myself, I wouldn't have even known what was being said in those slides at that time until the interpretations were actually provided.
But how would you have sequenced them?
Well, at that time, that was, to me, one meeting that was taking place at the sort of 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock meeting time.
But that isn't what you told the Commission. You specifically told the Commission that when the AMCU president went forward, members of the protester group were first allowed to address the group themselves.
That's my understanding at that time when I presented this, and as I say, I don't change from that now. That is what I understood at that time when I presented that and when I made the presentation, for that matter.
But you accept now that's incorrect?
I do accept that's incorrect now, yes.
On what basis had you reached that conclusion when you made the presentation and made the statement to the Commission?
Now that I think I've gone through some of the footage which you go through in the evidence leaders package, as well as what you're saying now, I can see that the sequencing is not right.
No. The question is your understanding. You said you understood something different, and that's why it appears. That's why you told the Commission what you did in the passage that was read. The question is, what was your understanding based on?
At that time?
Yes.
It was to try and reflect the meeting that took place there at that time. The sequencing specifically of who spoke where, I can't recall that was important to me. It was simply a fact of this was a gathering which Mr. Matunja had come to. Certain speakers were allowed to speak. He also gave a speech, and it was placed there. I can't recall that I was concentrating over those specific areas there on who would be saying what, when, in what sequence. And as I say now, Exhibit L, presentation of the police, was simply something the police put together to assist the Commission to better understand from the police's point of view what happened. There are going to be inaccuracies in that presentation. We didn't have the liberty of speaking to people outside of the police, for that matter, maybe other than watching certain lineman footage and so on. But as I say, it was never designed as a document. It was tried to be as accurate as possible, but it was not designed to be scrutinized in the sense that it had to be 100% because it was going to be evidence. It was simply a presentation on our part. And that's why some of the videos that you'll find in Exhibit L are actually composites of are put together just to show, to give a background as to what was going on at the time. So, as I say, the accuracy of timings and so on, we did as best as we could. I concede there are oversights in it. We didn't think it that important that it would matter as much as it seems to be now.
You did the best that you could. Wouldn't you have looked at the properties?
Well, as I say, Chairperson, this obviously was an oversight because I didn't think that was important there. The properties I truly was concentrating on was those of photographs, to try and sequence photographs, to put them into orders and so on. I'm not saying I didn't look at, obviously, properties of videos, but I'm trying to recall, I even think that video of that crowd behavior, as I say, was put in at a later stage. And there are different versions of this presentation that one can go back to actually look at.
Colonel, I put to you that even if you hadn't looked at properties, if you had looked at slides 103 MTS, 104 MTS, and 108 MTS in particular, the one of Mr. Matunjwa, you'd have realized that they came before 122 MTS. Would you accept that?
Yes, but just to put me in the picture, the Matunjwa slide talking, is that a composition of two videos put together? Was it a single?
No, 108 MTS is a very brief, I mean, it's a couple of seconds of Mr. Matunjwa speaking.
No, but the one in the actual presentation?
No, the one in, remember, Colonel, there were two POPs video operators present at the copy. So what happened was one of the POPs video operators took the 048 MTS, which is the 30-minute file of the AMCU speakers, and then Mr. Matunjwa. It's a very long file. While that POPs operator was taking that video, the other POPs operator was taking little clips either of the speakers or of the crowd.
But the Matunjwa one, which is in Exhibit L, is which one? Is
048 MTS.
Is 048. But as I say, that can be the only explanation I have, is that they were in two separate, not seeing them in the time sequencing because of the different cameras.
Yes, but what I'm putting to you in response to that is that even if one just looks at the single camera of the 100 series, one will see a clip of Mr. Matunjwa speaking before one gets to protesters 1 to 6.
But
that's 108 MTS.
Is that in Exhibit L?
No, it's not in Exhibit L.
So it's a different camera?
No, it's the same camera.
But it's a different camera.
It's a different
from
clip.
Exhibit L's clip.
Well, it's not a different camera from the clips in Exhibit L on slides 162 to 168. It's the same camera.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it's not the clip that we used in Exhibit L. It's not from the same camera as the strikers that were speaking.
No, it is from the same camera as the strikers who were speaking. Protester 1, Protester 2, Protester 3, Protester 4, Protester 5, Protester 6. We've been through this before. You'll recall that 116 to 118 are Protesters 1 to 3. And I think it's 120 to 122 are Protesters 4 to 6.
Yes.
And Mr. Matunjwa is 108.
But I'm asking, is Mr. Matunjwa's 108, is that the file in Exhibit L?
No, it's not the file in Exhibit L.
That's what I'm saying. The file in Exhibit L, the movie in Exhibit L, is from a different camera.
That's from 48.
Yes, and I can only give that as a possibility why they were not sequenced in the correct order.
But my response to that is twofold. The first is if you look at the file properties, whether they're from one camera or two cameras, it becomes irrelevant because the times speak for themselves. Will you accept that?
They do, but that's considering that I was looking at that at the time. As I say, I don't know where we're trying to move towards, but I concede that the time sequencing is wrong. It was not done maliciously. And the only oversight I can think is because it was from a separate camera that we utilized to put it there.
Well, let's look at that separate camera for a moment. The 100 MTS series. I understood you earlier now to have some doubts as to whether or not you downloaded the 40 MTS series on the 17th. You definitely downloaded something from POPs operators on the 17th. You'll accept that?
17th, 18th, around
17th, 18th, but onto your hard drive.
Yes.
You're now expressing some doubts as to whether the 40 MTS series was part of what you downloaded.
Yes.
Do you have any doubts that the 100 MTS series was downloaded on the 17th and 18th or 18th?
I have a version which starts at 001 MTS and it runs through to I'll tell you now. 067, no, that's a 066 MTS. That's what was given to me within the first 2 days of the incident.
So you're saying that it's possible that the POPs operator's 100 MTS series was also not downloaded onto your computer?
It's not the file names I have. I don't know if file names will be changed as they are downloaded onto other devices or from other devices. But I have from 001 MTS to, as I say, 066 MTS. And this one 067 MTS.
Now, Colonel, we've looked at the 40 MTS series and the 100 MTS series, and we've satisfied ourselves that between the two of them, they comprise everything that the POPs video operators took on the 16th. You accept that that's correct?
Yes.
Now, when I questioned you yesterday in relation to these videos, you accepted that this footage of the 16th was what was downloaded onto your hard drive on the 17th.
I can recall that the POPs downloaded videos onto my computer, the POPs members. To recall exactly what it was is difficult through memory. I know that I've worked on many POPs videos over the time, leading up till the Exhibit L was presented. But this is the objective evidence taken from the hard drive of what they actually did give me at that time.
But what you're saying today is that there is a possibility that in fact none of the POPs video footage of the 16th was downloaded onto your hard drive on the 17th or 18th.
Well, I'm not sure. We can check these if you would like.
I mean, check them against your computer. Perhaps you could do that in the lunch.
These are
you could do that at the lunch hour.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah. The point is, I understand, and I may have it wrong, that's why I'm putting it to you so I can be corrected if I'm wrong. There were two POPs video operators, and they took obviously separate videos. And the question is whether the miners' speeches, including the murderous one, were before or after the Mr. Matunju's speech. That's correct. That's the point.
We seem to be ad idem
yes.
on that score.
It's now conceded that the murderous speech was after, something like 50 minutes or so, after the Matunju speech.
Yes.
That's right. Now, the video on which Matunju's speech was recorded goes on to deal with, is that correct? With some photographs, as it were, of the protesters, the miners' speech. Is that right?
No, Chairperson. The long video of Mr. Matunjwa, in fact, starts with AMCU organisers speaking at 48 and runs through to the end of Mr. Matunjwa. That video focuses almost exclusively on the speakers.
When does that video come to an end?
That video comes to an end. We can look at its properties. It starts at 12:18 and it ends. It runs for 30 minutes and 36 seconds, so it will end at 12:48:36.
Thank you. Let's call that video A.
Indeed.
Now, video B was taken by the other video operator.
Well, it wasn't video B, it was videos B 107 to 122, as it were.
All right. But with one camera?
With one camera.
All right. Now, that video operator, when does his video start, or his videos start? When do his videos start?
Well, if we look at 102, it starts at 12:20.
So it starts, in other words, with the AMCU speeches.
Indeed, before Mr. Matunjwa.
And it runs through, with interruptions, I take it, it runs through to the miners' murderous speech.
Indeed, Mr. Chairperson.
So if you look at that video, or that series of videos from that one camera, instead of talking video A and video B, we talk about camera A and camera B. If you look at camera B, it appears that the AMCU speeches were before the miners' murder speech.
Indeed, Chairperson.
So all you have to do is to look at camera B to see the correct sequence.
That is correct, Chairperson. That is correct.
Now, that sequence is not the sequence which we see on Exhibit L. Is that right?
That is correct, Chairperson.
So therefore it's clear, simply by looking at the sequence of the videos on camera B, that those who prepared this section of Exhibit L got it badly wrong.
That is correct, Chairperson.
The question is how obvious or unobvious that was at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay, you've heard my exchange with the evidence with Mr. Taskerson.
Yes, sir.
That's the point you've got to meet, isn't it?
Yes.
If you looked at camera B, it would have been apparent to you, without looking at properties or anything of that kind, it would have been apparent to you that the AMCU speeches were before the miners' murder speech.
Chairperson, these...
Is that right?
Yes. Where I can recall these videos for the first time being shown to me or seeing them, I mean, I could possibly have seen them before this time, but they didn't mean much to me. I didn't know what was being said. They were translated to us, I think it was in early October, somewhere around that time. And the translations that were done by the video operators of the police that actually took them. I think one of them understood Fanagolo to some degree. And those were the ones that he'd actually pointed out. So I didn't choose to even look at the rest. I couldn't understand what they were saying in the first place. Those that he had chosen, a decision was taken not by myself, but to have them translated thus for the Commission. None of the languages that are being utilized there I could understand. But what I did do was take them, if I can recall correctly, and place them so long into the presentation in their places before the actual translated versions came back. So I was not fully aware of exactly what was being said there, because even the translator was, as it was sort of going, trying to keep up and sort of say, and I don't even think his translation was as accurate as what we're seeing there, for that matter.
I don't understand how the translation is relevant. If we're simply trying to get the right sequence, with or without translation, if you look at the videos taken on camera B, it's quite clear what the correct sequence is, isn't it, sir?
But I didn't watch them, Chairperson, for that matter. I would be looking for something different when I was watching videos, something that would be applicable for the presentation. And I think initially those videos weren't even included. It was until the translations were
done that. But the sequencing was important. Your job was sequencing, amongst other things, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So if you used, without even looking at properties, you simply looked at the videos taken on one camera, the sequencing would have looked after itself.
Well, like I say, I didn't understand what was being said. And
did you have to?
No, but I didn't look at all the videos. I watched those which were shown to me during that translation time.
Colonel, just to follow up from that exchange with the chairperson, do you say you didn't understand what was being said on these videos?
Yes, at the time, that they were given in the language that they were spoken in, yes.
How could you select a video for inclusion in Exhibit L if you didn't understand what was being said on it?
They were the videos that the police video operators themselves came to explain to us at a meeting, to say these videos, this is what these strikers are saying. And because of that, those were the videos that were selected to then go forward to the presentation. They didn't show the rest of them. They didn't go through all of them. Those video operators showed us only those that they said were relevant there.
Did they translate slide 169, the video which we see on slide 169?
Is that the Matunja one? No, they didn't. I'm not sure why or how that came to be put in, but I think it was deemed necessary. As I say, Chairperson, this wasn't an exclusive Visser-Scott presentation. We would build the presentation and present it, and it would go through inputs from senior members of the police, etc., approvals, etc., before it would go forward. So it's not all just a Scott Visser. We were responsible for the building of it. The inputs were given by people. Certain slides are included at the discretion of others. And I can't truly, I don't place blame, but I recall that meeting in Rustenburg where those specific videos of the protesters speaking were shown to us and explained, and thus they were placed in. The one with Mr. Matunjwa addressing, I'm not sure why that was placed in.
Well, the address from Mr. Matunjwa at the Kopi on the morning of the 16th, or around noontime on the 16th, was a very, very important event, would you not agree?
Yes.
And I think that's possibly why it was placed in. If there was an attempt to represent that which was relevant, then that was one of the most relevant events of the day. But I want to go back to something that the chairperson put to you. The chairperson put to you that just looking at the one camera, at the 100 series, it would have been clear that the AMCU and Mr. Matunjwa videos came before the protesters' videos, the protesters' speech. And would you accept that?
I would accept that if, as I say, if I'd watched all the videos personally, keeping that in mind, that was what we were going to do. But as I say, Chairperson, if I can maybe try and make it clearer, those videos that are in the presentation were chosen by the POPs video operators because they understood what they were saying. Those were presented. I'd never taken the time to go through all of that because what they were saying I could not, and there was no relevance to me with regard to the visuals I was seeing to need to be in a presentation. It was only once the translation was made to us that those were determined to be in there. I don't recall how the Matunjwa video got there. I know it was a decision taken that it was needed to be put in. And again, I reiterate, there was no malicious intent to place it beyond the strikers or before them. I concede that is out of sequence.
Well, Colonel, when the chairperson said to you, it would have been obvious by looking at the 100 series, the one camera, what the sequence was. The three specific files to which I referred you in that regard, which would make the sequence clear, were 103 MTS, 104 MTS, and 108 MTS, you'll recall.
I recall, yes.
Now, there's a very funny thing about those three files, which are the only three files which make the sequence clear. The funny thing is that they, too, were not put onto the version of the SABC hard drive that was circulated to the parties and the evidence leaders. Can I ask you to go back to Exhibit JJJ17 and the thumbnails this time? It's 17.3. Let's look at what was culled from the 100 series for circulation to the evidence leaders. It goes 102. No. Sorry, I've sent you back to the wrong exhibit. This is what we got from Lonman. It's 23.1 and 23.2.
But is this not what the SAPs provided, what you have on screen?
No, this is what came from Lonman. See, if one looks at the top, it says Lonman hard drive original. Let's go back to what SAPs gave, which is Exhibit JJJ23.
That can be shown to us.
Can we see JJJ23? Keep on fluffing my lines. So let's look at what came from the 100 MTS series to the parties. Well, there are these strange 44 and 80 MTS videos that we can't really explain. Then it starts at 102. Then I said 103 and 104 would have told us the sequence, but they weren't given to us. It then jumps to 105, 6 and 7, none of which show us the sequence. 108 would have been Mr. Matunjwa, but it too was left out. I don't know what 109, I can't recall what 109 says, but then it picks up 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 116, 117, 118, 120, 121, 122, 123. So the three files that would have enabled us as evidence leaders to identify the sequence without recourse to file properties were not put on the SAPS hard drive that was given to us.
Just recall the numbers again, the numerical sequence of those three.
103, 104, and 108.
If you look at at what's on the screen, you see those are missing.
Yes.
And the one we saw previously was what was obtained from London, where the whole sequence was given.
Chairperson, we worked with what we were given. That's all I can say. What we had is what we used. And if they're not there, it's very possible that they weren't given to us.
Well, let's interrogate that proposition. I've put to you before that the 40 MTS series and the 100 MTS series comprise the total sum of POP's video footage taken on the 16th, and you accept that?
Yes.
Now, are you suggesting to us that if we don't see the 40 MTS series on the SABC hard drive and we don't see a complete 100 MTS series on the SABC hard drive, that somehow the POP's video footage of the 16th didn't make it over either to your laptop or to your hard drive or to the SABC hard drive?
Well, what I can tell you, that directly after the photograph you're seeing there is 044, or the thumbnail 044 MTS. That is in line with the ones I have, which started at 001 MTS and ran to, as I say, 066 MTS. So even how this has been put together, whether those thumbnails or whether the files change names when they get transferred or resaved, I'm unsure. But again, I can only say to what we had in our possession when we got to work.
Well, Colonel, I want to take us back a step, because what you're putting to us is quite a startling proposition. Major General Annandale issued an instruction to everybody on the evening of the 16th, as I understand it, that all video footage of the event had to be brought to you as a nodal point. Is that correct?
This is correct, and in the context of helping to build a presentation for the National Commissioner the next day.
Yes, but you and Major General Annandale then repeated that instruction several times over the next few days after that presentation had been presented.
Yes.
That's correct. So you were the nodal point where video footage of the 16th had to be brought.
Yes.
And in particular of the 16th, because that was the event.
Yes.
Now, you're suggesting to us that it is possible that the total POP's video footage of the 16th wasn't brought to you.
Well, I'm suggesting that what I have here is what was brought to me within the next 2 days. There could have been more delivered to me after this 2 days when I had the external hard drive, because the printouts I have here is when I transferred from my computer to that external hard drive.
Now, Colonel, I want to take a step back. You testified yesterday that the way the POP's video footage was brought to you was on camera cards. Is that correct?
From what I can recall, yes.
Now, the camera cards would have recorded everything that the POP's video operators took. That is how camera cards operate. Do you accept that?
Yes.
So the only way you could have got a directory that looked like that from the camera cards of the POP's video operators is if somebody had gone onto the cards and very consciously removed certain individual files from those cards. Will you accept that?
If there are files missing, yes, I accept that.
So
appears to have been, if one looks at...
Yes, I see that, Chairperson.
And then what was eventually handed over after the request of November, which is page 189 of the file 3.1, and then the meeting of the 7th of November, what was then handed over?
Well, Chairperson, we'll get to that in some detail a bit later, but it's... Colonel, would you accept that if one goes to the various iterations of the SABC hard drive today, one will find a full set of the 40 MTS series and a full set of the 100 MTS series on, first of all, on that external hard drive that you gave us yesterday, and secondly, on the one that we copied from you in June, or in July, which was the Brigadier Pretorius.
Yes.
So the full set is now on the SABC hard drive?
Yes.
So it got there sometime between the 16th of August last year and now?
Yes.
And POP's video operators came to you with their cards on the 17th or the 18th and downloaded what was on the cards onto your computers, onto your laptop?
At some stage they were at me, yes, and they downloaded some footage.
And maybe we need to get a bit more detail about that process. I presume they'd have come to you, one video operator comes to you with one video card and says, this is my footage, and hands you the card.
You see, I'm working, as I've said in my statement, to the best of my recollection. This is not a matter that we've had time to go and sit and to work this out. We had the Thursday itself, which before it preceded a couple of days where it was hard work, long hours. Trying to recall now on the Friday morning, or whether it was the Saturday morning, and I know that the POPs guys were with me at some stage then, and I downloaded footage from them, which is evident from what I have here. I'm also assuming that it was from SD card, because that's how those cameras work. I don't think there is any other way they could work. Thus the assumption that it was from the SD cards that I downloaded it. But beyond that, I can't speak too much. That's why I'm asking for objective evidence to be viewed, so that we can get to the bottom of what exactly I had and what I'm being accused of having that I never had.
But we're not making accusations at this stage, Colonel Scott. And in terms of objective evidence of what you had, we know that there are very limited ways of establishing that now, because on your own version, and I don't want to cast any doubts as to that version, you perfectly reasonably, after you transferred the original archive that was on your hard drive, your internal laptop hard drive, onto the external hard drive, you perfectly reasonably wiped out those directories on your laptop to make up space. That is a perfectly reasonable course of action, because the archive was now external. But what that means is that we cannot now go to your laptop to see what was on and what wasn't on, because what was on has now been removed. You accept that?
I accept that I did remove them, and when I placed them to clear up space, but as we know, there are ways and means that one can go into a laptop.
Well, we may have to ask our forensic expert to look at the hard drive of your laptop, but it is a lengthy process and one that is unlikely to be capable of being completed in the next couple of days.
If that's going to solve where we're at, then we need to do that.
Well, I thank you for the tender.
Okay, well, I take it we'll have to take that up, but it's going to inconvenience you a bit, because I think you're going to have to be there while it's being done, because there's private material and so on, confidential material, that it won't be the concern of the forensic expert. I understand that. But what's puzzling me, you see, is that somebody, let's use a neutral word, omitted 103 and 104 and 108 and 109 from the sequence. Now, either, Mr. Shaskerson put it to you, the possibilities. The two questions that occur to me, one is why, and the other one is who. I'm not so interested actually in who for the moment, because as far as I can see, it could only have been someone in the police. So the responsibility lies somewhere in the police. But I'm interested in why. What possible motive could the person or persons concerned have had? But perhaps I shouldn't ask you that. I mean, that's just it's something you can't answer, perhaps. But it's something that's puzzling me, I'm afraid. Perhaps at some stage it will be clarified.
Well, in fairness to Colonel Scott, I want to run with that point a little, because I want to. Well, I don't need to put you. You have accepted that the objectively incorrect sequencing of slides 162 to 169, and in particular 169 at the end rather than the beginning, is a sequence which is calculated to prejudice, which is not calculated in a deliberate sense.
You can calculate in the objective sense.
It's calculated in an objective sense. Is likely to cause prejudice to AMC. You've considered that. I don't want to impute motive or anything like that. But I do want you to address this, which is, I'd like you to go to Exhibit SS3. And page 24. of SS3.
Sorry, SS3 page?
24. SS3 is I think, the first generation of reverse engineered plans.
Can I just clarify page 24?
It's the 24th page in the bundle of SS. It's that slide which I'm interested in, which is up on the screen. It's the background slide, rival mine worker unions. And Colonel, do you have that slide in front of you?
I do.
And do you recognize that as a document which you yourself drafted?
Yes, I think it may even come from Exhibit L.
A reproduction of it may appear in Exhibit L, but this particular slide was given to us as the SAP's plan, the SAP's PowerPoint presentation of the plan on the 14th of August, if I recall correctly. But do you recall putting a slide of this nature into one of your presentations at the time?
It's not a slide that was shown in the presentation to the audience, the commanders. It's a slide that was, I think, taken out of the presentation for the purposes of the commission to be placed into this.
Sorry, Colonel, can I understand you correctly? Are you saying that this is not part of a contemporaneous document, that this slide was not in any contemporaneous document?
When I deal with a planning, there is situation, there would be background, but I don't remember having the background as filled out as it is here, with as much information. And as I said, when I was asked to make a plan for each day, and I made it very aware that the plans that I was in December reverse engineering were not the plans from the time, but were simply there to help to assist the Commission to understand better what was said.
So, Colonel, this slide you're saying is a reverse engineered slide from around December, which was designed to enable the Commission better to understand what was said at the JOC as opposed to what was physically shown on a PowerPoint presentation at the JOC.
That's correct.
So it would then, I suppose, reflect two different things. The one is your recollection in December of what was said in the JOC. Well, let's just put it at that. It reflects your recollection in December of what was said in the JOC.
Yes, and it's possibly with hindsight to it as well, having worked on the presentation and knowing what I knew, but I was informed over time whilst at the operation, specifically by Mr. Sinclair, of the background of the violence that had been going on. And the Monday the 13th, I'm seeing also possibly where you're going with AMCU and SAP's clash, AMCU and security clash.
We will get there, Colonel Scott,
Yeah.
but maybe we should wait until we do. I'd first like to clarify the status of this slide. But I think we have. You say it wasn't a slide that you prepared contemporaneously.
No.
And it was reverse engineered in December to reflect what you recall as having been said in the JOC, possibly with the benefit of hindsight in also preparing the presentation. Is that correct?
It's to the best of my recollection, yes.
Well, we may at a later stage come back to the status, but let's just take that status as given for present purposes. And I want to ask you to turn also to page 27, which is 4 slides down. And if you can read that slide as well, and then we'll come back to discussing the content of the two.
I see it, yes.
So, in slide 24, you describe the background as relating to rival mine worker unions known as AMCU and a recent aggressive history, and you deal with the clash between unions, as you put it, on Saturday the 11th of August. Sunday 12th August, AMCU and security clash, 2 security officials killed. Monday 13th August, AMCU and SAPS clash, 2 police officials dead, 1 critically wounded, 3 AMCU dead, 5 wounded. And then moving on to 27, AMCU possibly defiant, feeling the clash with SAPS resulted in their victory with killing of police officials and seizing police radios and weapons. Witch doctor providing muti to AMCU group, creating mindset of invincibility. Well, when I read these slides, what it suggests to me is that you didn't distinguish between AMCU and the strikers. Is that a fair inference to be drawn?
I think it is a fair influence, and I think remembering that I set these slides up in December, and possibly again with very isolated hindsight on my own, it was obvious, or not, I don't want to say it's obvious to everybody, but it seemed to me that with Mr. Matunja addressing the strikers and doing his part with them, that it was more an AMCU grouping than it would be a non-grouping.
But my question was, what I put to you is that you didn't distinguish between AMCU and the protesters. You accepted that.
Yes.
Second proposition I'm going to put to you is that you viewed AMCU as having clashed violently with both mine security and the SAPS. Would you accept that?
It's what's written there. It's at this time, it's what I perceived, and I perceived that, and even through the small amounts that I was picking up of information and so on, that even though some of the protesters happened to still be non-members, that was only on paper, as they were looking to move over to the AMCU union, which I believe has happened today. As such, as AMCU has become the dominant union at Lonmin.
My third proposition is that you held AMCU responsible for the deaths of the 2 mine security officials on the 11th. And go back to page 24. AMCU and security clash, 2 security officials killed.
I think where this was aiming, it was to look at giving the group of protesters a name. Because in general they are protesting for some reason and under some organization. So it was simply not looking at the AMCU organization as the greater organization and implicating Mr. Matunjwa. It was simply the members, in my opinion, were mainly affiliated to AMCU or planning to become affiliated with AMCU.
I'm sorry to interrupt you for a moment, but I see from F2, which is the statement of the National Commissioner, she says that when she arrived at Marikana, she received a briefing from the people concerned and also from Lonmin. And in paragraph 17 of her statement, which is page 5, where she's dealing with the events of the 13th, she went to Marikana after the killing of people, the clash. She says in 17, the mine management informed the SAPS delegation that there were ongoing clashes between the members of the 2 labour unions, AMCU and NUM, and the management further stated the clashes had already claimed the lives of 9 people, as we were briefed by the police, etc. So it seemed quite clear that the information which the SAPS originally received from Lonmin categorised the group of strikers as being AMCU people. And that appears to have been a view which was consistently held by SAPS based on the information that they'd received. And though you were reverse engineering, whatever the word is you use, this document in December, you were, as I see it, correctly reflecting your understanding at the time in August.
Yes, and Chairperson, I think it's correct.
Would that be fair?
What you're saying is my understanding. I don't want to speak on behalf of others, but there were many points that made myself and possibly others believe that it was a more AMCU-affiliated group.
Well, we start from the fact that this was the information the police were given by Lonmin. Yes. I take it you also got that information, whether directly from Lonmin or from those who got it from Lonmin. Is that...
Commissioner, at first I was also told that it's more faceless, they're not too sure. But I think that was more the I don't want to say the official, but the accurate, again, being objective, that they couldn't exactly say that these were all AMCU members. But the feeling was, and in discussing later with security personnel of Lonmin, when I was starting to put together the initial plan, was that, and this is where we got to kind of get the feeling that the Korea hostel was more an AMCU-dominated hostel, and most of the militant grouping was residing at that hostel, and that the NUM hostel was more a Vonnecorp-dominated hostel, with the NUM offices around the corner. Thus, the attempted approach of what we deemed was possibly more an AMCU grouping of people that were approaching that NUM office.
The point is, that was your understanding.
Yes, that was my understanding.
And it was, I would assume, primarily based, well, not primarily the wrong word, but based originally at least on information received from Lonmin, which was the information which the National Commission had also received.
Yes.
And of course, the view was to some extent strengthened by the way the two presidents were received.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. There was, of course, also a suggestion at one point that half the people on the, I'm not quite sure the correct percentage, but a substantial number of people on the COPI were, according to the books of Lonmin, were NUM members, and there were deductions being made from their salaries paid to NUM.
Yes.
Another substantial number, probably at that stage largely from Korea people, were AMCU.
Yes.
And then there was a substantial number also of people who didn't have a union affiliation.
Yes.
You know. But certainly your understanding initially was it was a clash, as you stated here, between the two unions. The people who attacked the NUM office on the 12th, where there was a firing and so forth, they were seen as being an AMCU faction.
Yes.
And then that belief, if one can call it that, continued through the days thereafter. Is that right?
That's correct, Chairperson.
So, Colonel, to recap, at the time, and with hindsight in December when you reverse engineered these slides, you say, you didn't distinguish between AMCU and the protesters.
No.
You viewed AMCU as having clashed with both mine security and the SABs.
I was aware that, and I'm not saying this because the chairperson mentioned it, but I was aware that possibly not everybody there would be affiliated to an AMCU. But I believe that the thrust of that movement and the beefs that they had, driving for more money and so on, obviously was going to be more towards the AMCU side. I didn't see a third option. I saw there was NUM, which was rejected, and there was AMCU, which was being accepted, with the leadership being able to speak openly with the people at the COPI. Thus, the people at the COPI being possibly not affiliated on paper, but definitely affiliated in heart towards looking at AMCU as being the savior in the situation.
But it goes a little bit further than that, because the slides that we're looking at suggest that you regarded AMCU as being responsible for the death of 2 mine security officials on the 11th, and also, most importantly, for the death of 2 police officials on the 13th, and the critical wounding of a 3rd. I mean, if we go to the slide on page 27, AMCU possibly defined, feeling the clash with SAPS resulted in their victory with killing of police officials.
As I can say, if we go back to the actual plans, the true documents that were created before this, I'm not even sure it says AMCU.
Well, maybe we should, Colonel, because we don't have the plans on the 14th, but what we do have is we have an attempt at reverse engineering immediately after the tragedy on the 16th, which is a file called Ops Platinum PPTX. And you refer to it at a time in your statement. It's the file which contains a whole lot of Operation Rhino slides. I wonder if we can go to that presentation now. It's JJ50. It's file 1, page 2.
lodged.
The front page says Operation Platinum, Lonman Mine, Maracana, 13 August 2012. It will be J 50. And if we can now call that file up, J 50. And while we're waiting for that file to come up, Colonel, first of all, do you recognize this document as a document that you yourself drafted?
Yes, yes.
And the properties of the file reflect that it was last saved at 6:13 p.m. on the 16th of August 2012.
Yes.
Would you confirm that as a correct reflection of when you prepared it? So that was prepared in the immediate aftermath of the events of the 16th, 6:13 p.m.
Yes.
And would have reflected your contemporaneous thinking?
At that time, yes.
If we can then go to the slides, starting off on slide 3. And we see the same slide that then resurfaced in SSS3, background. Rival mine
Sorry, slide 3 that we've got says scope.
It's slide 4.
It's page 3 on slide, sorry, it would be page 4.
Slide 4 is, sorry, page 4 is what we're now seeing. And there I see that, before you go further, I noticed something. I'd spoken about the clash between the people who were thought to be AMCU and at the NUM office as being on the 12th. I was wrong, it was of course the 11th. But what I note here is you say unions clash, brackets 2 dead. Now, that was the story that was put out by the strikers. It now turns out that 2 people weren't killed. 2 were wounded and taken to hospital. Is that right?
That's right, Commissioner.
But does this reflect then the understanding of the police at the time this plan was drawn up?
I'm cautious to say the police, as that would put everybody in that bracket, Commissioner, but it was definitely my understanding. And it's even possible that I was presenting these in the days before with the same understanding. But what it came down to was there was a group, and there was that was sitting at the copy. And my understanding definitely was that group was more affiliated towards or leaning towards the AMCU side. We were led to believe it was a union issue. There was obviously finance involved, which we knew, which was a labour dispute with Lonman. But obviously there was union issues with the issues that happened on the Saturday between the NUM office and so on. So at the time and with the understanding I had, would have put it into the bracket that this is the rival union AMCU and NUM that are at loggerhead to some degree.
To begin with, I just wanted to show you that both of these slides were prepared in the document you prepared on the 16th. If we can then go to slide 7, which is page 8 of that document. And there we see the same slide that we referred to on page 27, starting AMCU possibly defiant, feeling the clash with SAPS resulted in their victory, with killing of police officials and seizing police radios and weapons. Now, I do want now to go where you've known where all of this is going all along, because it is a concern that I have, which is that we have a very curious coincidence here. We have a series of contemporaneous slides which on their face would give SAPS reason to feel a whole lot of animosity towards AMCU. On their face would reflect that SAPS had reason to feel animosity towards AMCU. Would you accept that?
Well, that's an argument we will challenge, Chair.
Yeah, I know. With respect, Chairperson, professional police members, and specifically those of us that were not involved on the 13th, it was a professional duty still to be carried out. There was no thoughts or intentions of, if that's where you're going, of possible retaliation or to blemish the name of AMCU.
Well, I do want to put to you what our concern is. Our concern is there are slides which suggest that SAPS didn't at the time distinguish between AMCU and protesters. And you've confirmed in your testimony today that we're not just talking about at the time, we're also talking about December last year when you were doing the reverse engineering process. The slides suggest also that SAPS held AMCU responsible for the deaths of 2 police officers. It says AMCU possibly defined feeling the clash with SAPS resulted in their victory with killing of police officials.
It's fair to say that the SAPS regarded AMCU as responsible. Isn't it fairer to say that the drafter of this slide held that view? It may well have been a view shared by his colleagues, but you can't put it higher than that, can you?
I take the point. I've possibly put it to...
Sir, Commissioner, I think it would be more accurate. I'm quite aware of how the police officials died. I'm quite aware of there was a group of strikers. That group had to be given a name of sort. There was no intent to go out to blemish an AMCU name or something. They had to be, and to us, they seemed to be more the AMCU union affiliated members that were participating in this for the obvious reasons that we've said. So it's not that there was any intention to go out after an AMCU name. Maybe the wording should have been saying the AMCU affiliated or thought to be an AMCU affiliated members.
The point is that the time the document was drafted, or rather at the time when the thought processes set out in the document later existed, it was believed, rightly or wrongly, reasonably or unreasonably, that the violent faction, if one can call it that, was correctly described as being an AMCU faction.
Yes.
And for the record, Chair, AMCU is a juristic person. It can't kill anybody except vicariously. So that word is used for sake of label than anything.
I use the word an AMCU faction, indicating a faction of people who belong to AMCU. But anyway, the question is not whether that was so, not whether even the belief that it was so was reasonable. The question is whether that was the belief, and the witnesses conceded that that was so. Mr. Schaskison, when you reach a suitable stage for the adjournment, would you let me know?
I'm right at the end of this section of the cross-examination, Chair. Well, that's the one side of the coincidence. The other side of the coincidence is there is this frankly inexplicable missequencing of slides in Exhibit L, which objectively prejudices AMCU. So I just want to put that problem to you because it is a problem we have, and if there's anything further that you have in response to that, then now is the time to give us the explanation.
Chair, so that we're not at cross purposes with the evidence leaders, perhaps they may articulate in what way was AMCU prejudiced by incorrect sequencing. I can't follow that.
Well, if I can set it out, the incorrect sequencing is in our submission calculated to cause prejudice to AMCU because what the exhibit shows and what was again reinforced in the presentation of the exhibit before the commission, what the exhibit suggests is that we had protester 6 giving what is frankly a murderous speech, talking about killing Homeland policemen and finishing them off at the Koppie. And immediately thereafter, an AMCU person stood up and the first words of his speech were, "That has to be respected."
I don't think we need to debate the matter now. Is there anything further you want to say or a point you want to make before we take it?
Not at this stage, Chairperson.
Right. I'd like to suggest that the counsel for the police, referring to Mr. Semenya, and Mr. Schaskison, come and see us during the lunch adjournment. We would like to explore with them whether the laptop of the witness cannot be imaged, I think is the correct word, and that various other matters can be discussed in that regard. We would hope that the end of the process would be an agreed statement of incorrect slides and time sequences in Exhibit L, which can then be put to the witness as common cause so that the cross-examination can be substantially reduced. But and then also, of course, explanation can then subsequently be obtained from Brigadier Pretorius and Colonel Fisser about these matters. But if some kind of an agreement can be reached on that, it would, I think, save a lot of time. So at some stage during the lunchtime, I'm proposing to adjourn now till 1:45. We'd be grateful if we could see Mr. Semenya. Sorry? Yes. Yes, I suggested we should do it now before we have lunch. We have a meeting then in chambers with Mr. Semenya and Mr. Saskison to see whether this can't be sorted out. We may well save a lot of valuable time if we do that. So we're now adjourned till 1:45.